Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Off Angle, here with episode 11, of course. We are mid-major at the moment. Just kicked off the Legends stage. We're, 2 games into that, really, for the most part. Going to be joined by Voo for this episode. We've got major things to talk about, and I think we've got a few funny things to talk about as well.
Fellas.
Also to do with the major.
Is it gay to have silk sheets?
Wait, that's not what I was expecting. I thought we were going to go straight into this tweet that, Voo wants to talk about. I don't think so.
There you go.
What about you, Pronogo? I mean, it's a perfectly valid question.
It is a valid question. I don't know if I would say sheets, because I can't say I've experienced those yet, but I will say silk shirts.
Oh, they're great.
Silk shirts look pretty good.
I
they feel
sleep
pretty nice.
like this isn't the problem though. There's you have to go through a whole ritual and like fucking pray to your god or something to make sure your silk sheets don't get ruined when you wash them, So
Sure, yeah. That's the problem with like expensive
on average
suits and stuff.
Yeah, they may be dirtier than they're supposed to be on average.
Could be.
But they're comfy. They're comfy.
Well, as long as they're yours and not another feller's, then there's no reason why it would be gay.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's the truth, really. It's the truth.
Yeah.
But
all right, okay, all right.
Yeah, cool.
Do you want me to bring up my
Well, I mean, it's the whole
hot note.
You hit me up the other day saying you wanted to come on. You got some petty grievances.
Okay. Here's my tweet. All right, let me hit you with the tweet. All right. The crowd is annoying, but the people on Twitter trying to gaslight, by the way, this is the correct use of gaslight. Nobody ever uses it correctly. This is the correct use of gaslight. They're trying to gaslight everyone and say that this crowd is totally normal. Is 10 times more annoying to me. And this is the fucking facts, okay? And it's almost like a manifest reality thing where I swear to God, I've been called a xenophobe at least 15 times in response to this tweet, okay? I shit-talked the Danish crowd way harder, by the way. Never got called a xenophobe. I got called a fucking idiot many times, and that's fair. If you're allowed to say that, you're allowed to disagree and say that, okay? But it's like a manifest reality where it's like you just call everyone that disagrees with you a xenophobe, and then people do actually get annoyed with your entire situation, with like everyone that's like, oh yeah, if I criticize any Brazilian ever, apparently I'm xenophobic. It's oh god, this is the part that really tilts me. Okay, that's the part that really tilts. It can't just be a disagreement. I can't just say the crowd sucks. It has to be that if I think the crowd sucks, it's because I'm a racist. What the fuck is this?
Oh, it is actually because we is Brazilian, Voo.
The crowd is fucking awful. And by the way, I'm the last person that should ever be called like racist for this, because I've been incredibly consistent. Incredibly consistent. You can't be more consistent. I went off on the Danish crowd. And I want to say one thing. People, there may be a point, okay? People on Reddit, there is a tendency for people on Reddit, anonymous accounts, to be kind of, I'll admit, a little bit anti-Brazilian, okay? There is like a pretty anti-Brazilian sentiment. And admittedly, in the responses to this tweet, like half of them are like, oh, you hate us because Brazilian. Well, I'd say like 25% are that. 25% are, you're dumb, this is the best crowd ever. And 50% are like, yeah, well, what did you expect? They are Brazilian. So, there may be like, there may be a slight point, but of the people that are like known in the scene, like any player, any caster, any analyst, I think Brazil gets less hate because they don't want to get the backlash.
Sure,
like there is an artificial amount of like propping up or like sucking up to Brazilian fans because they don't want to get the backlash. Whereas if it's a German fan, or especially a North American fan, there would be a lot more shit talk. There would be a lot more like negativity in general because you're allowed to do that and you're not going to get a ton of backlash.
Well, there's an immediate test case that we can point to here, which is that, like, you remember Machine himself in that Royal Arena was popping off at the crowd who were booing Shocks because Machine was like, oh, you won a major once upon a time. Now, meanwhile, obviously he's not a stage host in this event. He's a caster, but he's just like, yeah, sure. Just keep calling out whatever their position. Like, he's like, what an incredible crowd we have here today. It's like there is a little bit of an apples to oranges there in terms of his position relative to the crowd and like the fact that it's not in the middle of a stage host. But I mean, it's clearly a case where like he's not he's not even thinking about speaking. I don't think he's like thinking that thought and then saying the opposite because he's not like a moral person or whatever. I think he's genuinely in a point where he's like, I can't say shit about this, so I'm just gonna enjoy the fact that it's like a visceral moment. And it is like when you're listening to the show, it's like been the loudest major that I remember in the recent history at the very least. Like I don't remember the crowd sounding this popped off or whatever during the PGL ones, and maybe that was because PGL audio, LOL. But like whatever the case may be, like the most recent audios, this is definitely the one where the crowd feels the loudest. And I think the players are saying something similar. Maybe they're also pandering, who knows? Like there's all this stuff going on where it's like, oh yeah, isn't this great? There is an element where it feels like a celebration of Counter-Strike. But then you get to a point where you're talking about like IHC v Double O Nation, and you're like, oh shit, wow, they just keep always making noise when there's an IHC flank coming. I wonder what's happening. And then it's just the same. You know what I mean? Like there is definitely something fucked up happening here. And all the people who are trying to say that there's no cheating are clearly not true.
Well, let me just establish the difference between anticipation and cheating, because I've also got a lot of responses that are like, if you don't understand Brazilian or Portuguese, if you don't understand Portuguese, then how are you trying to say they're cheating? As if you're hearing the crowd through the mics. It's not. It's the rumble of the crowd that's letting people know. So, for example, okay, anticipation is something that it does fuck with competitive integrity a little bit. It's probably not optimal, but it is just, that's the way things are. You kind of take the good with the bad when it comes to LAN. And anticipation is like a flank is coming up and the crowd's like, ooh, like they're about to get a kill, right? Someone's crosshairs on someone else and they're like, or they're about to go for a knife. It will be given away. You have to, if you go for a flank, if you're looking at someone, you can't pull out your knife and take your time. They're going to give it away. But that's just anticipation. Cheating is when you're oohing because the guy's looking the wrong direction, or the crosshair happens to be anywhere near them, or because your team is getting flanked. But when the other team is, and this is really bad in the Danish arena, in the Royal Arena, where Heroic would be flanking and the crowd would be going nuts because I guess the Danish, I think the thing with the Brazilian crowd is a lot of them might not even be CS fans and they're just there for the vibe, and so they kind of follow along with other people that start these things, whereas in the Danish one, I got the feeling that it was more like targeted, like really intentional, because like Astralis would be flanking, crickets. You could hear a pen drop in the arena when Astralis was flanking, but against Heroic, it's like Heroic's flanking and they're flipping the fuck out as soon as Heroic is flanking, that's cheating because it's clearly benefiting one team. And it did happen in the IHC OO Nation. I can give you a link to the clip if you want to play it on the stream, or on the show. But it was pretty bad. There's been a few very egregious moments where you would never have this in an unbiased arena. And people will point to the Olaf one on Cash, where he like looks at them through the wall and the crowd, because there's like that 12-minute video of crowd influence. Those were anticipation for the most part. Like in the Olaf one, he looks at someone through the wall in checkers on Cash, and the crowd doesn't do anything. He looks away, looks back, crowd doesn't say anything. He shakes his crosshair, and then the crowd goes, ooh. That's like, I fault Olaf a little bit for that. I mean, I feel like that, but maybe that's part of the game. Maybe I'm just being being an old man yelling at clouds with that one. But I feel like that's a little bit bullshit. But it's not the same. It's very different.
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, I have kind of been enjoying the crowd, the energy of it, and there was a little bit, some of the games they weren't as engaged in the challenger stage, when Brazilian teams weren't involved, or maybe the Brazilian teams have played for the day or whatever. I'd say it's gotten a lot better. We're only a little bit into the Legends, but I think because obviously we've got the bigger teams, and you're going to have Na'Vi fans in Brazil, you're going to have FaZe fans or whatever, where you might not have BNE fans or whatever, right? So I will say that the energy has picked back up a little bit more, and I think now for the most part it's going to be decent. We'll see, what happens when Furia plays and whatnot. But the one big thing to consider here, obviously, your kind of grievances or whatever are with the tweet and the whole sort of xenophobic angles being quite a common defense for Brazilian fans and whatnot. But ESL, to their credit, made it a lot more difficult, right? So Goles' streams going out in the arena, and when there was all this sort of cheating, and I would say the most egregious one that I've seen, and maybe the one that you're thinking of as well, Vu, is this overpass clip, I think, right, where it's like it's a 1v1 and he's just kind of spamming his crosshair all over the place, which you can tell he's only really doing because he's probably
Debate
heard
the
that the crowd are,
Yep.
picking up and all that. But fortunately for integrity, in a sense, like he's a bit too slow to pick up on it and ends up dying anyway, right?
I don't know. Does he die?
I'm pretty sure he loses it.
I
I'm
can't
pretty
remember.
sure.
Yeah. I don't
Well,
think
there was
I
more
mean,
than one instance. So.
It wasn't.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
think. I don't think the crowd might not have even changed too much of how he played. I think the way he was looking around was clearly
Yeah.
because of the crowd, but they were clearly trying to cheat.
Yeah.
It was clearly intentional. And if the peak had come 2 seconds later, because as soon as the crowd started making noise, as soon as he knew where the guy was coming from because of the crowd, he got peeked out. It was like he didn't have that extra second to be ready for it.
Yeah, sure,
a second longer, 2 seconds longer, and he just wins that automatically just because of the crowd.
Yeah. But so Golas, his stream's going out and everything, and they turned X-ray and the minimap off, I think.
I'm not sure if that's still they did, but I don't know if
it
they
was
turned it back on or
temporarily
not.
because of the fact that
Yeah.
IHC versus 00 Nation was
Well,
getting so egregious.
Yeah, sure, but maybe it's like it's an argument that obviously we've only got Furia left in, not even 9Z or anything, and then maybe there is a little bit of push and pull where it's like ESL have the power to take it away if you kind of abuse your position as a viewer, which I think is a good deterrent. Maybe we'll see how it pans out, but obviously Furia.
The reaction from Gaules was absolutely despicable, though, and it's not like this is the first time something like this has happened with this guy. I mean, the fact that he's a partner of ESL at this stream is just absolutely egregious. As far as like I'm considered, like I look at this and I just see nothing but bad things. Like from this guy's past, where he's like platforming the MIBR roster that had fallen after those cheat accusations went over to Leaf, who then moved on to Valorant because fuck that.
I think it was Leaf and Zeppa, or was it just Leaf?
I think, well, they might have just decided to throw it at both of them, but Leaf was the main recipient for sure. And that was in the Chaos lineup, right? So that was like a long time ago. But like this guy was involved in that fiasco. He's been involved in other cases of drama between Brazil and the rest of the world. And his response to the fact that they had to disable this because of the concerns about integrity is that like he's no surprise that for Brazil, it's got to be harder. They will never understand what it's like to be Brazilian. It's like, fucker, I hope I never understand what it's like to be Brazilian. I never want to be able to say, wow, I'm totally fine. No thing on my conscience at all about literal cheating happening at a world championship the one time we finally get an event in this goddamn country. Goddamn. Like, how about when we first started this event and people were saying, don't go on the streets during election day? What do you mean? Why is this even a country for a major? You ever think about that, guys? You ever think about, maybe it's shocking that your country has this early. No, there's no self-awareness. There's no thinking maybe it's not right to take people from a bunch of other cultures and then bring them to a place where they could just get gatted in the middle of the street or run over or whatever the fuck. Like, you guys don't even pay attention to your own news or what? Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And the Gaules angle of him just saying, oh yeah, it's always got to be harder for us. Fucking grow up here, dude. Like, what do you even mean? It's just pandering to his own people that are just already buying into the same idea. So yeah, there you go, Voo. Nobody's gonna call you xenophobic now. They all got to me. Furia 0-3. Except that didn't happen. But whatever.
Okay, so my understanding. Okay, the translation. It seems like there was when I read the Reddit thread, there was an initial translation where it was like, it seemed worse than it was. The "you'll never understand what it's like to be Brazilian" thing there's no difference in that. But
yeah.
The initial translation seemed to suggest that it was like insane for ESL to turn off X-ray and the radar.
Maybe they should learn some fucking Portuguese so they can see what we're saying or whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah, that one was dumb as fuck. People think you need to understand Portuguese to like, cheating has nothing to do with understanding the language. Absolutely nothing.
You guys don't even need to say words. You can just make noise.
Exactly. It's exactly that. But one thing he said was the retranslation that someone suggested was that he wasn't trying to say that it was ridiculous for them to turn off X-ray and radar, but it was ridiculous for them to turn it off and not have a separate feed for the stream so that you could see it on the stream but not see it in the arena. That's the reach, and that seemed really reasonable. But nobody's gonna understand what it's like to be Brazilian. It's kind of like a meme. I've gotten actually replied to a bunch of my tweets, people saying that now is like it's already been turned into a meme. But
you'll never
if
understand or whatever. Yeah, there's
if
all
the
memes,
intent
yeah.
was to just say that it's insane for them not to have separate feeds, I mean that's a very that's just a smart comment. If that was the actual intent, it's hard to tell because obviously I don't understand Portuguese, so I don't know what he was really saying. But if it depends on what the intent there, it depends on what the intent there actually was. Yeah, it's a little hard to tell.
Well, what do you think, Scriv?
I don't know.
Are you feeling that this is the best major ever? Are you feeling this is the best crowd ever?
So-
By the way, I find it really funny that in the middle of the rolls for this, like at the beginning, first of all, we still have surf and chill. Like, okay, hold on, I have too much triggered, so I'm gonna put that to one side. But the other thing that I can't believe is that they're talking about how amazing this crowd is, and then they roll the post roll or whatever, the mid roll, where it's OJ Borg saying we've got stacked with the greatest fans of all in Cologne, Germany, which is nowhere close to Brazil. And
yeah,
like,
true.
Come on, man. Like, whatever. I mean, maybe they're not watching. Maybe they need to learn English or something to get upset at ESL. I don't know, but that's just funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For the most part, 95% of the time, but it is that kind of 5% that's maybe soured things a little bit. I think in terms of numbers, it's probably going to be the best. But then, is that because we're in Brazil, or is that just because the numbers have kind of been going up? Anyway, Russian viewership and everything. But
yeah, they can still access the internet. That's crazy.
Well, indeed. But I have a pretty good feeling about where the crowd is at the minute. I think that's obviously because we don't have those kind of legendary teams that everyone's behind and everything. Furia might get a bit of it, but
dude, it's already like before they cheat, it's already too far because they're literally telling Zaiwu to stick it up his ass or whatever the fuck. Like, come on, man. Like, what are you even doing? The kind of stuff that's happening. Now, again, I don't know Portuguese, so maybe everybody in the scene has the wrong translation on that. Maybe none of us will ever understand. But that just seems a little bit far.
I think that might be what's being referred to as like you'll never understand.
Yeah, that's definitely like the cultural stuff, right? Like I can speak from English culture or whatever. We're very into our football, and sometimes when going abroad, the kind of hooligans and the more serious members. I think it might have been the World Cup or like not the last Euros, but the one before, like before COVID kind of hit or whatever. International tournaments, basically, right? Where it was kind of like us versus like the Russians going a bit crazy, and there was just like fights in the street and people throwing chairs and stuff out of restaurants and all this, and it's like the English tourists ruined it for some people, right? So there certainly is, like, I think from time to time kind of the cultural differences that can, and maybe people would argue, right, we had like IEM Sydney and all that, and it was kind of funny, the Australian crowd making up a bunch of chants. Some people are going to think that that's annoying, there's always
I think it goes a little further than that. Let me say,
yeah, definitely.
I think the culture is that Brazilian sports crowds, at least Brazilian sports crowds, you have to guess more than just the sports crowds, but give them benefit of the doubt. Brazilian sports crowds, pretty homophobic. Okay, it's not that they're annoying. It's like a lot of these chants are outright homophobic.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And it does seem like if this was in a Danish arena or any arena that spoke English, nobody would ever accept that, and people would be getting kicked out. But that, I mean, admittedly, maybe you can say that is not understanding Brazilian culture or something. Sure, why not?
Well, yeah, there's loads of.
It's more than just annoying. Like I don't want to equate the two.
Sure. But yeah, and I mean, there's kind of this whole, like, on the talent announcement they did, I don't know if you saw Rich's video, he kind of explained this probably better than I will, but on the talent announcement, there's 24 of them, right? But they put, like, 23 plus one, and all this kind of stuff, because...
Hey, Anders is the +1, dude. He's making the simulation happen.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So there's all stuff like that. I guess it's tough, because I think it is a cultural thing, but it is also from our more westernized culture sort of unacceptable. And yeah, like you would say, if I would imagine even if we went to Rio and just did the English translation of some of the chants or whatever, and
Then
someone
maybe you're
caught
the only
us
one
on
who
film.
survived script.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you mean you wouldn't, you couldn't have them, you can't have the casters being like, I've got in my ear now, this chant, what they're actually saying is, Zaiwu, you take it in the ass. Like,
Yeah.
no, you're not gonna, nobody, they would not
But I
say
mean,
that.
even just as like a spectator, right? That if you're in that, if we decided, oh, it's like, I don't know Portuguese very well, so and you do it in English, and someone catches a video of, it is kind of that thing where it'd be unacceptable, cancelled, all that shit. So
Well, basically, the question is, would they be able to say any of what they're saying as chants if they were traveling to
All right, hold
another
on.
stadium
Let's
somewhere
be fair
else?
here for
right?
a second. Let me give you a hypothetical.
Here we go.
You
I
might
like
see
these.
you might see an English arena say Zaiwu get fucked. Is that not invoking the same exact concept?
Yeah. There's some that are definitely like just use derogatory terms that obviously we're not gonna get into and all that. But I don't know, bro.
If you say get fucked, that leaves a lot. Listen, there's some holes in the human anatomy, and they specifically zeroing in on the ass, and that is different.
Yeah, but arguably, get fucked is in a literal translation could be said to get taken in the ass.
Yeah, sure.
Is a literal translation from English to another language. You could potentially essentially say that that's what that means.
Yeah, no, I think that's
you
fair.
wouldn't be lying.
I don't know, because it's not just.
No, but this would be the same thing the Brazilians are. I can't believe I'm arguing this, but this is the same thing.
Sure.
Culturally, it doesn't mean the same thing. It basically kind of just means, it doesn't mean like the one where they're saying like you should literally die. It doesn't mean you should literally die.
Like, somehow you're gonna die. You're gonna die. That doesn't mean you're gonna die, guys. You just don't understand.
We do have the same thing with like get fucked, right? Like that is kind of the same thing where it's like, someone would translate it and you're like, yeah, but in the way we use it culturally isn't like actually get fucked. It means like get destroyed. This would be the exact same argument Brazilians are using to you that is like being written. I see what
I would say, hey, listen, guys, I can be in the stadium and I can yell Zaiwu get fucked, and then I can walk across the street and say, hey, gay pride parade, and not lose my shit. So maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's what you'll never understand. I don't know, man.
Like I see the argument. It's just it's the cheating, like the oohing and the fucking cheering when people are behind people that really is like it did get on my nerves. But by the way, again, it's not. Only in a few games was it that bad. What's way worse is the number of people on fucking Twitter trying to be like, this is just how crowds always are. Have you never watched CS before?
Don't you know that crowds are just allowed to bring in air horns all the time?
It's the same thing they say at Royal Arena. This is just what all crowds are like. All crowds are like this. All crowds are not like that, okay? And I will admit, again, I don't know why I'm giving an olive branch out, because nobody gave me any fucking benefit when I said this. Absolutely no Brazilians gave me. Okay, there was a couple, but basically 95% of any comments were very negative. If it was negative and I saw where they were from Brazil every time. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the thing is as well.
I'll just finish. I will say the Danish arena, I think, was actually, there was less people, but they were worse in terms of how hard they were trying to cheat.
Yeah, sure.
They annoyed me way more.
But that's just because Astralis went deeper in the tournament, Vu. If Imperial was actually good, these people would be doing the same thing right now. So
I thought
they wouldn't have their X-ray, bro. They wouldn't have their X-ray in the room. So.
I thought in the Danish one it was more like very targeted, very intentional. Whereas in this Rio circumstance, it feels like there's a lot of people that don't know CS. There's a few people leading the cheers, and then people are like following behind. But that's just like my read of it. I could be on the opposite side. Maybe the Danish one was less targeted.
I think the Rio one is in some ways worse, because Gala's is like the official broadcast inside the fucking event, and he's the one sometimes leading the shit. So or people on his show or whatever. Again, I don't speak Portuguese. I don't know what's going on. But it sounds like a lot of what they're doing is then adopted by everybody around them.
Yeah, and a lot of the time. What I will say to the argument of like people or whatever in your comments saying that. Because I think the sort of oohing that we've had in the past, where it's like that anticipation that you're kind of talking about, it can also mean anything. It could, if you're a player and you're really trying to, first of all, I think we have to pay attention to where the noise cancelling is at, right? That can play a fair, you need a very loud noise clear to get through that, right? Which we have had some of that indeed at this major. But in the past, where you have this kind of like anticipation oohing thing, it can mean anything. If you are trying to read into that, it's like
Yeah.
Is it a player behind where I'm aiming? Am I getting flanked? Is there someone like next to me? Is there someone in the smoke?
Is it somebody else in the entire map? Like, is it my teammate they're spectating? They
Sure,
don't know
yeah,
who's spectating
that's
who
very
yet.
true. That is very
in
true.
In a 1v1, it becomes a lot worse, though,
clearer,
right? So that's where it's like the...
I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe because we've had a scenario that feeds it looks worse. But I think, if we are going based on principle, then yeah, there's just kind of no place for this, really. And I think that, look, there's one angle. The big thing, it's like there's one angle to lean into it and, indeed cheat. And then it's also the other side where you're not really backing down. You're kind of unapologetic. I think there's maybe a world where you could respect it, where it's like, yeah, sure, we're going to cheat for our, countrymen.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Well, I know that's okay. So I will say the oohing could mean anything is part of why how targeted it is a big deal, because the oohing can mean anything. If you're playing Faze versus Astralis, or like okay, just kidding, that would never happen in this arena, because Astralis is never fucking making it anywhere. All right, but Faze versus Vitality, so two teams that can actually make it to a major. IGL is good enough to make it to a major.
Okay, there you go.
Faze versus Vitality. I gotta get into glaive hate what I can. Like Faze versus Vitality, oohing doesn't mean that much because it could be any player at any time. But when you have a team that's clearly the fan favorite, then over time, like if Imperial was still in this event, they would be able to, and not even intentionally. That's why this is so insidious. It's not even intentional. If you're on Imperial, the crowd is trying to help you. You can't not know that. And so as soon as they start oohing, it's to help you. Almost every time it. So you can't not, that information is there, you can't not use it, and that's the problem. When it's to help one team, then especially in like 1v1s and stuff, they're oohing to help you specifically. They're not oohing to help the other guy. That's where it's a really fucking big deal.
Yeah, it's funny because like the Imperial 9Z match, obviously the crowd was mostly on Imperial. But when we were working on the, where we were listening to the 0-0 Nation versus Furia match and the Challenger stage, they were much quieter, actually. It was really surprising because they didn't want to cheer for either. Like they almost, I'm not saying they were this, calculated about it, but it's almost like they couldn't overwhelmingly support either team because they both had Brazilians. So if they said too much noise or whatever, like they didn't have somebody to target in the way that Vu's talking about. So it's a single game, small sample size, but just something that occurred to me now. I was hearing Vu say that. And yeah, I guess to capstone the point, obviously, I don't think it makes sense to say that you're xenophobic if you criticize crowd that is cheating, but that wasn't even Vu's point in his tweet. His point was that's bad, and everybody telling me that this is normal is making me more angry.
The crowd wasn't like when I made that tweet. The crowd wasn't actually that bad. This was before the IHC thing, or no. Yeah. This was before the Vertigo one, the pissed around with Furia versus whoever, where Case Rado looked the wrong way, and this was before it was a huge thing. This was just like, it was starting to be bad, and people were all going like, "This is totally normal. It's exactly how it always is." That it wasn't even that bad at the time.
Indeed.
And that's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. Is that like this didn't have to be considered a certain situation where somebody's being xenophobic. You don't even have to be Brazilian to be the person that Vu is angry at. So he can't be that he's xenophobic because he doesn't even single them out. There's a lot of people who are like, 12-year-olds from America who are pissing him off by tweeting that this is actually fine. I've watched CS for one day and this is always how it's been because I've only watched one fucking game because I made this account 3 days ago or whatever. Yeah. Whatever the case may be, like it's already enough. So
alrighty. Let's move on before we.
And for those who say that
all the hours on that. Oh, hello.
Vu doesn't get any pussy.
Yeah,
obviously you're wrong.
I knew that was coming.
There you go.
All right.
I've trained him.
Very wholesome content. I wanted to move on to the challenger stage and kind of the results from there, and then I think we'll have a bit of a chat about the format. Really, maybe we can tie it in a bit, but yeah, obviously a few storylines coming out of said challenger stage. We had Gamer Legion nearly making it. We had Greyhound upsetting everyone's pick'ems. We had both the, old guard, at least, Brazilian teams going 0-3, which Imperial is not the wildest stretch, let's say, but 0-0 Nation, I know a few people felt like they were kind of legit coming into this. 9Z.
More than 0-3 for sure. Right?
Well, indeed.
They were my second choice after Greyhound.
Oh, okay.
I would have put them 0-3.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
I should have put Imperial 0-3, but I thought their opening
committed.
matchup, I thought their second round matchup would have been better, but instead,
But yes, and then obviously, I'm sure if you're watching this, you're paying attention, but Miles, BNE, Outsiders, Big, Furia, Fnatic, Team Vitality, and Cloud9, as I read it off the screen. Don't remember that, of course, but they're all the teams that made it through to the Legend stage. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame. Let's start with the boyos who didn't make it. I think it's a bit of a shame for Gamer Legion. They look kind of legit in the BO1s. They look kind of legit in the RMR, actually. They had that, kind of famous overtime game with Faze that I think they ended up losing, right? But they had some pretty good games there. Just couldn't really get it done, losing out to BNE, Furia, and Cloud9 in the BO3 stages. So, someone's got to do it, unfortunately. Someone's got to go 2-0 and then bottle it, but it is a shame to see this team. Any kind of thoughts on the Gamer Legion squad, boyos?
Sad that they didn't make it through. Obviously, was really rooting for them against Furia, so I could win my prediction of there being 0 Brazilian teams at the Legend stage of this event. Didn't come true. Brazil's still there with Furia, but I'll still say that there will be no Brazilian representation in the next stage. And then I can only be made wrong. I'll just keep. Yeah, all right. They're not going to get to playoffs. All right, they're not going to get to quarters or semis or rather.
Sure.
Just to keep doing that, and then eventually they're out. So
the xenophobia coming through.
Again, I'm harnessing all of the anger directed towards you. They can't possibly come after you now after the things I've said in this episode. So, no, I think, Gamer Legion not making it through. I'm not sure if it's down to nerves or what. There were definitely a couple of matches or rounds against Furia specifically that I remember they just bottled or whatever. They had the advantage. There's a couple of rounds where they were like, I think there was at least one round where they were 1 second too late to plant a bomb, or they were like, really tight retake, but didn't have time to defuse. There's a couple of those. So it's like, really these pieces are just a little bit out of alignment. And once they come back in, assuming that they can maintain this, which is also, this could be a flash in the pan event for them, taking a lot of heavy scalps or whatever. Could have been big, but unfortunately wasn't.
Yeah, it's unlucky. I think it is kind of unlucky. It's one of those where they don't have a lot of experience. Still a relatively young team together as well. I don't know that Shuya, as you say it, is kind of signed or whatever.
That guy needs a rebrand, dude.
Yeah. I think that's how you say it. I'm not 100%, but we'll take near enough. So yeah, and I think it's just a case of like you're not going to get that experience without going through the rigmarole of it, and probably indeed losing a few out. Now the hope is, for the team and for fans of the team, that they can come back to the next major, or whatever, right?
Is this our new Copenhagen Flames, perhaps?
No, I don't think so. I feel like that maybe more goes to BNE for me. They performed pretty well
they're in the second phase, right? They're in the second phase, and then they're going to get sold or whatever, or bought, or rather, they're not really a part of an org right now. And then, maybe the BNE guys can make it to the next phase and then get knocked out by an ENCE or somebody like that. Although ENCE isn't looking too hot right now anyway, by the way. But, there's all sorts of stuff like that could be doing it. The question is, I want to pick your guys' brains about BNE, honestly, because I did not rate these guys. When they were going up against 0-0 Nation, I thought for sure in their opening match in the Challenger stage, there was no shot that BNE are going to actually do anything. Their run to the actual major from the RMR looked super unconvincing. I thought they were going to lose out to Forza after Forza defeated Astralis famously, and that didn't end up happening. So they did make it here. They pull out this crazy stuff, and so far they didn't get a super great start in the first round of the major of the Legend stage. But I honestly, the fact that they made it to this level, you can't say that they didn't earn it in some ways, but I mean, hold that thought, right? Because they beat 0-0 Nation, and then they beat an understrength Big who have Sin, and then they 2-0'd, they got 2-0'd by Mouse Sports.
No.
And then who did they win against?
They 2-0'd Gamer Legion. They went through 3.
Oh, sorry, they 2-0'd Gamer Legion.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So it was, in that case, it's like, I'm not really sure that they actually did qualify, and maybe we'll talk about the format later on. But that's one of those things where it's like, okay, I guess you can only go up against the teams that you go up against based on the tournament. Obviously, that's a truism, but that does make me call into question whether or not you are a truly elite team, because you didn't beat any of them to get here. You beat a bunch of people who, I guess Big qualified, right? But like you beat a bunch of people who didn't, and you beat a bunch of people who like we don't really rate super highly. I don't think Big is a championship level team, even with Favin, and they don't have him. So definitely not without him. So that's sort of my take on this guy. I can't rate their T sides. Obviously, this tournament has been horrible for T sides in general. But curious to your guys' thoughts on this roster. Are they actually legit, or is this flash in the pan at a major number 2, which is always weird to say because obviously we just went through this with Copenhagen Flames.
I mean, I think so. We've always had teams like this. Something to maybe consider on the older majors and everything is that we were at a stage for a little while where we just kind of had one a year. So by the time the next major rolled around, that team had perhaps been indeed plucked apart or fallen apart or whatever. But now that we've got 2 a year, there's obviously a lesser timeline, and you've got more tournaments online and all this sort of stuff. Their form online coming into it wasn't great, right? So a lot of people hadn't fully written them off, but certainly not 3-0. So it does seem like yes, we've got that team that on LAN, the way that they play as well, right? Like I think the LAN aspect really does help them. Obviously the amplified speed that you get, response time, and all this sort of shit. But yeah, and they just are very individually driven, very passionate. It is indeed a bit of a test. I think we can intertwine it. We can touch on and talk about and maybe fully break down what we do with the format a bit later, but we can definitely touch on it here. They are a team that have benefited from where this format puts them, right? They come in with a meh seed, so they play against a meh team from, a different RMR. And yeah, they've not really had to play it. I don't know. Big on Dust 2 is a fair take. Big on Dust 2 is not a bad take. With
a stand-in.
Even then, it's a pretty good map for CS. He's playing lights out as well. It's not a super bad, and they're like pretty dominant in their victories as well. So there is a fair degree of credit, but they have certainly benefited a little bit from where the format's at. And then I think they're a team that can sneak through because they do have a decent ceiling and good individuals, but they maybe don't get as much attention from some of the teams in this stage, at least in terms of like prep and things like that, because you probably feel confident going up against them, and then it's a bit weird because maybe if you are one of the bigger orgs, or we absolutely need to make it through, like a Vitality or a Cloud9 who funnily enough struggled, they've not had to play BNE, so we didn't get to see what would happen if a BNE drew into even like Fnatic or Outsiders, you know what I mean, like they're not the scariest teams that they've had to face off against. So I think that's certainly something that, whereas, you can argue like the Mouse Run, who are the other 3-0 team, that's fairly legit because they open up against Outsiders, they play Fnatic for their spot in the Legend stage. So that feels a bit more legitimate, and, we've seen that pay off as they come in and, pick up a victory here on the first day against Liquid pretty dominantly. They lost their second game, but, still decent enough. Whereas BNE, they dropped their first game, right? So, yeah, it maybe starts to speak for itself a little bit. But I do like the team, and I like the story. It's cool to have a team in here that speaks to the major format, speaks to, the no organization, countryman, comradeship, all this kind of stuff. And indeed are able to turn a few heads. But yeah, there's still a few caveats there, but I think it's well deserved. I don't think they've snuck through needlessly or whatever,
I would disagree a little bit. I mean, I don't think they've snuck through like without being tested at all, but I mean, I think it really does. It does say a lot about the format. I mean, it does say a lot about the format because in basically what you've done is you've said that like in best of threes, you're not going to get eliminated without a best of 3, but then you have the problem where, well, what happens when 2 good teams lose the best of 1, and then you have you have 2 of the top teams in the world in the 0-1 phase and 2 kind of weak teams in the 1-0 phase, and then you end up with these times where they beat Double O Nation, who, if you just look at their run, they barely, right? They lost to IHC. Sorry, I was thinking the other way around. But I mean, they barely even picked up a map against IHC. They won a 30-round map against IHC with a lot of crowd support, we'll call it. They got wrecked by Furia, and of course, they got wrecked by Bad News Eagles, right? They beat Big with a stand-in, yeah. And then they 2-0 Gamer Legion, who didn't make the next phase, right? it's not the most impressive run. And I didn't have them going through because just looking at their online form before the major was not looking too good. And then even in the even in the RMR, they didn't look that good. They beat Eternal Fire, lost to Spirit, beat Fours. Is that much? Right? I don't feel like that's that much. I think
did they get a victory against a team that actually qualified to the major when they were playing the RMR? Since you're looking at it, right?
That's
I don't
a good
think so.
question.
Eternal
if
Fire
it's
didn't
Eternal
qualify.
Fire, they didn't get it. Obviously, Forza
Astralis
didn't get it. That was the last one.
Yeah, and they beat Astralis, and Astralis didn't get it. Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, even their run here wasn't convincing in that sense. Not just because they lost a lot of games, but also because they didn't win against anybody notable, right? So
yeah. I kind of think that like.
Sorry? I'm sorry. I'm just on Wikipedia and everything. Their Boucholt's score is -2.
I don't even know how to.
I'm not 100% sure what it means, but it's like kind of, I think it depends on your RMR placing and things like that.
No, I think it depends on who you play in the challenger stage is your score. Basically, how good they are. Like how did your opponents do?
Right. Okay. So maybe indeed they kind of get, and they play against Spirit, who are like a top seed, right? Because of where they placed in the RMR.
So
I'm just wondering why, like, this format extends past that too, because I mean, I know we're still talking about B&E, but like, if we're going to talk about B&E in the context of what their seed is and how they got slotted here, I think a Faze or not a Vitality because they just came in, but a Faze or a Navi are like, oh, cool, yeah, B&E, that's a team that's pretty low rated or whatever. Like, why did we have like these banger opening matches just to be disappointed that they're a best of one? You know what I mean? So I know that we'll get to that point later, but that's just like another weirdness thing. Like whatever their seeding is, it doesn't seem consistent with what like a panel of experts would actually decide, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah. I think part of it, if we're like want to end off B&E, I think part of it is that I think you can say that their form online might speak well to how good some of these tier 2 teams can be. I also think it speaks to certain play styles. I think Vitality, for example, tends to play down to their opponent. And I think they can play up to almost any level, but they have a lot of close games against kind of weak teams, and I think that's about somewhat about their play style. But typically, they seem to edge it out over the weak teams. They just never look any fucking good when they do so. At all, they look really, really weak.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of other teams typically kind of just play into their strengths. And when you play into your strengths, it works really well when you play certain people, but then you can get run over as well, especially online by teams that also play into their strengths. You just run into a brick wall and you just don't have a solution for it. And I think that's kind of like the state of tier 2 that's kind of the realities of tier 2 is that typically tier 2 teams, I think, play into their strengths and it can work really well and you can really catch some top teams off guard, but you can also lose to absolutely anyone because you're not focused on like fixing and making sure you beat everyone, the way Astralis did back in the day. Now where they make sure they lose to everyone. But back in the day, they make sure they beat everyone. Instead, you make sure that you play your style of CS as good as possible, and that can lose to basically anyone and beat basically anyone. And I think that's kind of the story of a lot of these teams that do really well in the major.
Well, do you think it's kind of a broader point?
Surprise teams? I mean, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. It's kind of a broader point to me that this, like true CS, if we want to call it that, should be either just online CS, which would be terrible, or just LAN arena CS, which would be great, but expensive. And it's like the fact that you cross pollinate, like the Gamer Legion squad, that they could have qualified to this stage, and it would have been crazy. It would have been a crazy Cinderella story. Nobody would have expected it. It's kind of similar to the B&E case, actually. It's like nobody would have expected this team to go through. But then they can, before that, it's not like they were lighting up the world, although they're a fairly new roster. After that, I really don't think they're going to light up the world. What happened with Copenhagen Flames is the same exact thing. They just went straight back to doing basically nothing, and then they qualified again. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty crazy. And, I think the main reason why they were probably able to, so I'm surprised actually that Copenhagen Flames held onto the roster for as long as they did, although I know that's not necessarily entirely by their choice. But after the major run where they almost made it in Stockholm to playoffs, remember that Stockholm major was the one where you only got stickers if you were in playoffs. And other than that, you didn't get stickers, which is really confusing. because now it's back to what it was for the major prior, where you get stickers for even walking into the contender stage or whatever it's called. So like, what the fuck is going on there? That's really weird. So that's just confusing, and this whole system feels like it's probably due for an upgrade and maybe an overhaul, as Scrib and I were talking about earlier. And that's
Actually,
probably like
I would actually disagree. Actually, as much as I think for competitive integrity reasons, I think I understand why people don't want it the way it is, and I have my own gripes about that. I feel like I'm more of like I don't know, like what's a realist? I don't know. I like
Pragmatic, maybe.
yeah, pragmatic. There you go. I feel like I understand. Just like I understand how crowd anticipation can fuck with competitive integrity, but
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. Like it's the full on cheating that I have a problem with. I feel the same way about best of ones and majors. I think the reality is, as much as everyone wants to say that they would watch every best of three, it would be so much better if there were best of threes. The reality is, man, fuck that. Valve has the numbers. Riot has the numbers. They do the same shit. They always do a single elimination playoffs. Valve has the numbers. They always did fucking single elimination playoffs. They love these. They love these games where everything's on the line. People must watch it. I have to believe that Valve and Riot together have come see the data and know that people want this shit. I can't. I just have to think that. And
the Valve
I don't
case is a
think,
bit different because the game
Yeah.
is increasing in popularity. You
Yeah.
don't want to invoke Riot because their numbers are going down and they don't know
I'm
what
just
the
saying,
fuck
like,
they're doing.
I'm just saying that, like, surely the two of the biggest companies in the world combining for the same type of format in their big tournaments, surely there has to be some numbers they're seeing. It can't just be random. It can't just be.
Well, it's not. I don't think
don't.
it's random. I think
Yeah.
this is easier to run best of ones because of the team count, and I
Yeah.
don't think we should have this many teams at a world championship. And I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
actually fair. It might
Yeah.
just be easier. I think fans want it. I think fans want it. Personally, I feel like best of threes. Even myself, I wish that I would watch more best of threes. Reality is, it's a lot of fucking hours of CS. You know, I'm just not watching that much.
I mean,
I think the fans want it.
it's tough.
Not
It's,
want it, but they want it. You know, they
Yeah,
might
sure.
say otherwise, but I think in terms of viewership, I think they want it.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard, man. The BO1 day is like the longest day. Depending on how the
Yep.
BO3s go, obviously. But, like, you know, there's a bit more of a set time because you've got BO1s. Obviously, your BO3s
Yeah,
can be
I'm
anywhere
going to
from
bed after this
2
show,
to
so
5,
this isn't.
you know?
I'm not sticking around to watch these fucking games.
Right,
That's
sure.
crazy.
And
so.
I mean,
Yeah.
I did the same thing. They obviously, you know, it's Brazilian time and everything. Like, we've got the last game of the day here on HLTV is due to start at 1:20 my time, which is pushing it. That's pushing it, man. For, like, you know, these, I'm not on the gamer hours anymore, you know. And, like, the other day it was like, and maybe it's cool in a sense, but I think Greyhound and Gamer Legion won their games like right at the end of the day or something. To really start. But Gamer Legion especially won their game, and it was like the last one of the day. And I'd gone to bed, and then I wake up, and I'm like, what the fuck's gone on here? You know, obviously, like the pick'ems are fucked and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so,
Well, yeah,
you know.
it wasn't even just your pick'em script. It was also whoever ends last might have to play it first thing in the morning, and then they don't even have time.
Okay,
Right.
so you
Then
think
they have to go
the
to bed,
solution is
so.
less teams, not like
Yeah.
more? Okay.
I mean,
I think it's also more best of threes, but I think you can do that more reasonably with less teams. The problem is
Sure.
you also don't want best of threes with shit team v shit team, and you probably don't even really want shit team on either side of that spectrum, actually, even if it's a good team on the other side, because at the very least it'll be over quickly, probably, but it's really not something you necessarily want to have to sit through. I think
it's hard.
we should just
It
have
is
something
hard.
consistent. I mean, you think of the Blast Showdown, and the games go pretty quickly unless there's some sort of psychotic, like crazy close match that we weren't expecting, or unless it's a good match that you actually want to watch, right? So I feel like, you know, not to go and say, hey, look at ESL and now look at Blast, but like actually do that, because this feels like they could probably do something like that if they had less teams. The problem is they don't have control over it. Like Vu was talking earlier, Valve have like kind of this whole thing, this weird relationship where, you know, they're not really paying that much attention, but they're also not really allowing crazy innovation on the tournament organizers for majors specifically. I know for a while we weren't using the Swiss system, and then we started to all of a sudden. I don't know who pitched that to Valve, but somebody did. And if we could get them to pitch a new format that was even better, that
I think Valve has said actually that they let TOs run whatever tournament format they want.
Okay, so wow.
I think they've said that.
If that is true, then why are we still on this format? You know,
I
So
think the
that's-
fans want it, man. I'm telling you, I think the fans want it.
I don't know. It's hard. There's you know, 'cause-
They might not have control over the team counts, right? Like that's one thing they probably don't have.
Yeah,
control
Yeah,
I
over.
think
yeah,
I
true.
think that's it. Yeah.
So
But if we
Maybe
go,
they
if we
can-
go
yeah.
from 16, we'd probably go down to 12. You know, for maths. And then I don't know, like EU would have to lose spots. There is another argument
Yeah,
where
fuck you.
there's another
You can
argument
just have
where
all the
like
spots.
you can draw it out, and have, you know, kind of like Worlds does a little bit, kind of like conventional sports do in the international competitions, where you have, you know, over a number of weeks and do it kind of on the weekend. We're not talking like World Cup, because I don't know how much attention you guys pay to football or whatever, but you know,
Soccer, actually.
yeah. But the World Cup is going to be like 3 games a day for like 3 weeks or some shit, which is a bit mental. But it is also,
Okay.
you know, you can catch the games that you want and all this sort of stuff. I think we do
That's
also
the
have
thing,
that.
yeah.
That is also another thing that
Yeah.
like maybe we're missing here a little bit, is that generally speaking, like, you know, when we're wanting to watch the games, we'll probably want to try and catch as many as we can, like the 3 of us, when you know in the mood to and some fans are gonna be like that. Other fans are gonna watch Vitality because that's my team, you know, and they don't actually really, they'll catch the results for the rest of them, but they don't give a shit about how Furious Spirit goes, you know, or whatever, right? So that is also another angle in terms of like the games and trying to work them out. Format it's tough. It is really, really tough. I think there maybe is a better world than what we have, but it might cost more money. And that's kind of the big one. You know, the banknotes obviously control a lot of what happens here. A few more best of 3s has got to mean like probably 5 more days of major, and that's a fair bit of cost. But I think if we could kick off with best of 3s, it would probably improve some of where these upsets are. Now, at the same time, some BO1s are creeping in other tournaments. There is also this, it's like a, you know, haha classic argument, but if you are a favorite coming into a tournament or a matchup or whatever, and then you lose, just, you know, don't be shit. Like, I think it is an argument. I know it's kind of silly, it's kind of hard to sell, but it is an argument of like, you know, Faze today, for example, right? They lost 16-14 to Cloud9.
That's an unfair example because FaZe actually was just kind of shit.
Right, sure. But also, it's like, you know, because I was having a conversation with one of my friends about, you know, where the format's at, and he's into his football and talking about we have the FA Cup in the UK, which is like, you know, again, I keep bringing in the sports, but that is like the cup that anyone can get involved, like any team, not technically, but if you are a league and the leagues go quite far down, if you are a sanctioned league and you play in that league, you can get involved in the FA Cup, right? And that works where first round has shitty teams play against each other. Second round has, you know, a few more creep in, but they're still kind of shit. Third round, you're starting to get like decent level, what we would probably call like tier 2 teams. And then it's not until the 4th round that you start to get some of those good teams. Well, 3rd round, maybe they've rolled in, but they will shit on a lesser opponent or whatever. And then by the 4th round, that's when you're getting good team against good team. Yeah, and then it goes into, I think 5th round is where you start to get, you know, more round of 32 type deal rather than it just being like, you know, but that essentially would maybe be where our open qualifiers are at, I guess. But yeah, to kind of zoom it in and bring it further down, I think maybe just a little bit more time, a little bit more space for the games is probably the way to go in my opinion. But again, that just kind of costs money. And these majors were already pretty expensive to put on, because that is something again where it's like, to ESL's credit, I suppose we talked smack about them last episode, so I've got to do a little bit of dick riding. You know, the set, the kind of caster, well, desk setup, we've not really seen the casters so much actually, but the desk setup is pretty good, and it seems like it's in a good space, and they are well within the hub of the crowd and all this sort of stuff. You know, production's been okay. We obviously chatted about that last time we were out, Pronogo, and there's maybe a world in which, what's going to happen in a different country, and they can't even run Pro League super smoothly. Well, it's been pretty good, and crowd levels are all good, and all this sort of stuff. So, that side of things is good. But yeah, I definitely do feel like there's room for improvement. I think that's a general consensus on the format. There is room for improvement on this. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
To the point
right?
of the best of ones and giving the Faze example today. Remember that they started off with Cloud9 and then they had to face Vitality. It's like
it's Clown9 to you.
I agree, but they're now 2-0 after defeating Navi.
Right.
It's not like Faze. Okay, maybe the Vitality example is more egregious because it was a best of one that they lost 16-6. But remember that, and they did nothing on the CT side. Like they got run over on the CT side Inferno. So that definitely feels like a weird outlier that you wouldn't expect.
But do you see where the issue is with that? Is because Vitality and Cloud9 were our 3-2 teams, right? Now, now here's a wild curveball for you that if you know how this format works and you know that maybe you are, well, no, surely you don't want to play against, but I don't know. There's space for like, you know, you being okay with the fact that you go through 3-2 because you have potential to play against those bigger, harder, more prepped for teams and actually knocking them out in the Legend stage, right?
I don't think Vitality or Cloud9 wanted to face off against the two best
no,
teams
for sure, but maybe
so.
it's a bit of a wild line for me. I'll give you that. But in a best of one instead of a best of three, it could, you know.
I guess I don't know. I mean, they were clearly like Vitality almost lost to OG. They could have lost that if they didn't pick up their socks on Vertigo there.
Yeah,
that would have been.
I think they're definitely the thing is why we are in this situation where it's been like, whoa, look at these opening matchups, and then look at the second round as well, dude. Whoa, you know, is because they didn't play well in the challenger stage. You know.
Yeah.
Like that is
basically their own fault, yeah.
That is a pretty big part of it. It'd be nice to have reseeding, but I think that reseeding would benefit. It's like in where the challenge. So B&E, we can chat all the shit that we want or whatever about the way that they got through the teams that they played, but they still went 3-0. They still, you know, beat out.
You know who else
teams.
went 3-0 in the RMR script was FaZe Clan, and their reward was getting placed up against Cloud9 and then Vitality.
Yeah, so
this format is cheeks.
Right, this is kind of where the thing is. I think it's getting these teams here. You know, when you're at the major, but like, is
just
there
need reseeding, right? We need some sort of reseeding.
I know, but what I'm saying is because
panel of analysts.
But what you would do is B&E who have performed well, we'd be on the flip side of the argument, right? Because B&E who've performed well, albeit few caveats, whatever. But at the same time, Cloud9 in their BO3s, looking at it here, they beat Imperial, EG, Gamer Legion. Like you would give them that every day of the week. So you'd have the inverse. You'd have Bad News Eagles who've performed well playing against FaZe, and you'd have Cloud9 who played like shit playing against Ents or whatever. Right, like
well, you could just swap those two teams for the thought example, and I think that would make sense. And that would be, I mean, that would be one way to do it. You could also, like the old school way was having all the teams rank each other, right? Rank everybody who's not them in a list from 1 to, well, I guess it would be 15 in this example, and then based on, and so that if they have to do that every stage, maybe I don't know if they would have to do that for playoffs or not, but at least for this, like at the beginning of the tournament and at the beginning of each stage. Something like that could also solve this problem. It just feels crazy to me that FaZe Clan are down 0-2. I still have, like, I have to be proven wrong. They have to prove to me that they can't win the tournament before I count them out, even at this stage. But I still feel like this is just silly that they played two elite teams that we hypothesized could meet them in the final, but they did it in best of ones at the beginning of the tournament.
I gotta call out, like, man, Vitality is like Schrodinger's fucking elite team, okay?
Yeah.
They're like, they're simultaneously dog shit and amazing, depending on which side of the argument you want to go for. Because I know a lot of people didn't even put them through this stage, okay? Yeah. I know people that... Yeah. I know people put them out. Did you say you put them out?
Yeah, I did put them out 3. It's a little bit explanation for... it's all on the same channel. It's all on the same channel. But... context for that maybe you're a Voo enjoyer and you're over here. That's because I put them to go 3-0 in the challenger stage, and then they entered, and so now I'm on the inverse. That friendship with Vitality broken.
I'm not saying you're being
so there is a
completely
bit of that.
unreasonable. I think that isn't the even. I mean, 03 is pretty crazy.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
like saying they're not going to go through wasn't crazy. But then as soon as it like fits the argument, it's like, oh yeah, put against an elite team in Vitality that probably is one of the like.
Well, they
teams
should be,
that
right?
not
Like on
everyone-
paper.
like.
But
And even Maui Snake said the same thing. I think Maui Snake said it, or maybe
yeah,
think it
no,
was Maui
I
Snake,
think
where
I
it was
know
like,
the tweet. You're on about.
everyone's putting Vitality through, but it's going to be super obvious. Everyone's going to be like, wow, can't believe I put them through as soon as
Yeah,
they
yeah.
lose. Like, that's exactly how everyone feels about Vitality. And so,
Well, I put them through because I believe that their star power should allow them to carry
Yeah.
through and get to playoffs. But I didn't like if you asked me before the Faze game, I would have said, yeah, Faze probably take that.
but
Sure.
okay, actually, I kind of take it back because to be fair, Vitality lost to Navi and FaZe lost to Cloud9. That's like the 4 of the top.
Yeah, the
is that
top
literally
4 of the fucking tournament.
That was 4 of the
potentially
top
happened
5. 4
in
of the
best
top 5
ones.
in
Yeah.
the world, HLTV wise. And then there, it is a bit egregious when you have like Liquid playing Sprout. I mean, I guess Liquid HLTV wise is actually third, but you have Big playing Mouse, Furia playing Ents. Like, it is a bit egregious.
I
At
mean,
the same time,
it's
Liquid were the ones who were served up Sprout. If anybody should have gotten Sprout, I mean, again, Sprout qualified here as legends from the European RMR, so it's fucked. But they could FaZe could have gotten Big, FaZe could have gotten Sprout. They couldn't have because they were legends, but they could have gotten some if that.
Yeah.
You could have them pick their team they're gonna play.
Yeah, well,
It's
hard though because I think
qualified first picks their opponent.
I think this format has been stretched to its extreme, where we are seeing, and it's kind of you have to ask the question with where a competitive format goes of like, do we reward and this is where the major, because it's the major that definitely comes in, do we reward like the yearly performance, right, i.e. world rankings, and where we the viewer would like the storylines to go, or do we reward performance at the tournament itself? Yeah, and I think that also what you're dragging in is that we have the RMR, which is an extremity of the major, where it is like, yeah, surely FaZe, but I don't know. It's like the major itself is supposed to be harder than where the RMR's at. I would argue it puts us back into an argument for maybe bringing minors back into the loop.
Well, that's what the challenger stage is, basically, right?
I mean, I guess, but then
yeah,
it is like should you?
Okay. Let me give you. Let me give my statement here. I think before we can fix the tournament at all, fuck fixing the actual tournament, fix the RMR. And I think what Scrib said earlier was completely right, which is that you should, like the FA Cup, I think you said, where you seed in the better teams later in the tournament. I think the fact that it's a complete open bracket is a fucking joke. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, why do we have to watch Navi walk up to like an open qualifier?
Yeah, seed the better teams in higher. Once you fix that, then you can start looking deeper into it. I think, one of the things that I think could help maybe is you do have 2 best of ones on the same day. So you roll up and someone's got a sore fucking stomach. Like, they got an upset tummy and they just they lose 0-2 and then you have all this fucked up shit. So you could try and separate those out on days, but then the thing is, then you're adding in an extra day most likely. And then if at that point, why not play best of 3s? So it's like, you're kind of, it's tough to say. At least they don't have like best of 1, wait, best of 1, then best of 3. I don't think they have that, right? It's just best of 1s. Oh yeah, they do have that if you go like 1-1, right? Or like 2-1 or whatever.
Yeah. But we get some best of 3s into the second day.
Yeah, but at least it's into the second day. It's not like the same day. So at least there's that. But it does open things up, especially because although it seems like with the new 2018 money change, 2019, 2018, whatever, it seems like games are typically a lot closer, but generally you have more gun rounds, which should mean that the better team has a better chance of winning. But as CS evolves, you have more randomness in CS, where it's like, okay, for example, I know I can say this with 90% certainty because I've watched so many Astralis games. On Inferno, when they have a player, one of their 3 mid B players, so it used to be like Device, Dupree, and Magisk, I think. I can't remember the names, whatever. Those 3 players on that side, whenever one of them has the best spawn on T side, they always go for fast car control. They always, well, they used to at least. They used to always go for fast car control. And spawns are completely random. So it's like randomly you go for fast car control. And on CT side, basically, if your Opper has the best spawn, he always goes for a car pick, usually with the Fury or the car one way, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're from. If these 2 strats run into each other, there was no thought there. It just happened. It just randomed into each other. The same thing goes for a lot of things. Like, you just happen to run a strat. There's not a lot of thought process into it. You have the right spawn. When you have this spawn, you go for the strat. You go for the strat. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, so even though you have more gun rounds, you also, I think, CS evolves into more slight randomness in the way you devolve, like the way you choose your strats, which makes, it adds back in all the randomness that you lost, so best of ones are, I think people underestimate how much randomness there is in CS.
Sure.
Well, think about how many steps you had to take to explain that whole system, where it's spawn based and it's tendency based and it's all this stuff. It's like, it is actually harder for the average person to grasp. You can't just say now that, like, oh, you could win the pistol, win the conversions, and then you win one more round and you break.
Well,
your
that's the
economy
extra
again,
randomness, right?
So,
I mean, that's that's there too, right? That's always there.
Yeah, I mean,
well, the new economic model has different weak points, right? So it's just weird. It's very strange. And again, new, obviously, from 2018, but whatever.
I think
just preferred it.
I think something that would be a good start is if we can find a way to get rid of BO1s. I think that would be a good start. Maybe we have this, Buchol system or whatever, if that's even how you say it, like Buchol, whatever.
Colts. I don't know, man. Like,
Colts.
tell me how to pronounce
Colts.
Shuhi on Gamer Legion before we go into this.
But
why wouldn't you? You should just say Shuhi, and then he'll be.
It's just it's like Shuya.
I thought I heard someone say Sluhi, but I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't know, dude. His own fucking teammates in Mao's NXT were calling him Sushi, so I don't think anybody knows what to do.
I think Sui's funny, the whole like Ronaldo thing. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Device? Oh, sorry. Never mind. I'm not on Nip anymore.
Got him. It's actually not the first or even the second time that I've heard that joke today. So been sat in with a few of the other casters, and I don't know, Device has been joked about quite a bit. Yeah, so I don't know.
Man, I'm trying to restrain myself so much.
Yeah, I feel like if we can do away with BO1s, I think a lot more people would be happy. Players and whatnot of the like. To be honest with you, I don't know about reseeding. I am kind of a fan of like keeping it into the tournament itself. I think that maybe RMRs, but then it's like how. I think we're definitely in a position of like there should be some reward for the way that you place at the previous major, but not too much. All 8 legend spots or like half the legend spots or whatever, as it was in the past, is maybe a little bit too much, because then you do have a case of a Copenhagen Flames or whatever, and then it's like what happens when that team fucking gets picked apart or whatever. Are they just going to hold on until the next major because they've got a major spot and you get guaranteed stickers? Like blah 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 blah, right? But there should definitely be
crazy. Sorry. I'm just thinking about Crazy got sold for $1 million. And the major never happened.
Yeah. Well, unlucky. But so that kind of thing, and I think that's actually that's a really good point actually, because although a bit sad and a bit funny, it can kind of play into the world economy of CS almost, having those guaranteed spots, whereas if it's kind of points, it's a bit like, you can move players around and all this sort of thing. But I think there's always room for improvement, and I think that we're a group of guys that are very open to the idea of nothing's sure, but nothing's ever perfect, right? So there is also that it's difficult, and you have a lot of it. I think it is this big, immovable object, unstoppable force type deal, where do you want to please the players as much? And obviously players are going to be happier when they get rewarded, like BNE are going to be like, yeah, dude, this format's sick, obviously. But the other side of that argument is, do you want to kind of please where the viewers are and give us the storylines that we want, which is a Na'Vi Faze big game again, right? Like a quarter semi or whatever, or a Vitality tested at Cloud9 Na'Vi is another one that could be a cool storyline, right? So yeah, those types of things, which we may well, as the BO1 day is progressing here, we may well miss out on, because we've got Phase 02 currently as we speak. So they're gonna have to run it back through the gauntlet. So there's a world in which they maybe play a Na'Vi in there, and Na'Vi knock them out, like for a 3-1 finish or something, like a 1-3, I guess is where it would be for Faze. But so all those kinds of. But at the same time, it is. I don't know, man. Should Faze not be beating the teams? Should Faze not be? And we've just said earlier on, Faze played like shit against Cloud9. And the world of Counter-Strike is there for them. The laws of they won both pistols. Should be winning the game. It's a BO1. You should be winning that game. But they didn't. It was close, but they still didn't win it. So, there's all these types of... And then the 16-6 I'm looking at here, refreshing my memory from a little bit ago against Vitality. Like, what the heck, dude? You should be taking them. And I believe it was Inferno as well.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It was Inferno. They started CT. They had everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
can we stop with this starting?
Yeah.
It doesn't fucking mean anything. Okay, I had this conversation with the team I'm coaching. I had this conversation with so many fucking people. It doesn't mean fucking anything unless you're so mentally fucking weak. Okay, you are literally the equivalent of a small child, which, to be fair, some CS players definitely are. Unless you are that mentally weak, the side you start doesn't mean a goddamn thing. It doesn't mean shit. Arguably, there's two arguments, actually, because if you start CT side, on T side, when you might be down like 15-10, you have a better force buy, right? Which could argue saying CT side is better, not because you start on CT, but because you end on T, where you can have pistols to force buy on second half when you're down. Because, that does... If you think about it, in CT side, if you're down 15 whatever, you have to force, you have a shit force. But on the flip side, on CT side, you're saving so much now that you could say that ending on CT is the advantage, because then instead of saving on a round you didn't realize was going to be 15-10, right? Because you're ending on the harder side of the map, you go for the round in the 2v2 where you would otherwise be saving. There are arguments on both sides here. The side you start on does not fucking matter. Please stop saying it matters. It doesn't fucking matter.
I think...
Oh, dear Lord.
What I'm hearing is if there's arguments for both sides, but CT is more powerful, then I win. Because
I think, unfortunately...
What we didn't get into on here, by the way, is that it seems like CT side on LAN is more advantage than online.
Oh, it's godlike.
We talked about this before the pod. I don't think we talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of like Peak's advantage and shit is a bit nullified, right? With that, you're more of a technical guy than I am.
And A1S. And,
yeah, sure, big. Yeah, the A1S is pretty big. But on to the point in general, like, I think it's just a bit as old as time in Go. Like, when I first started casting 5 years ago or whatever. It was a bit of a, to use Maui's phrase that I saw on Twitter again, it's a bit of a like ad nauseum type deal. Everyone was saying then on the old economy and all this kind of shit, that starting on the CT side was an advantage, and would kind of crowbar in the idea of like, you have all your ducks in a row, essentially, that it's like you start on the CT side, and if you have a shit CT half, then, you go onto the T side,
and
it's a bit
come back.
No, but it's like you have a shit CT half, and you go onto the T side. It's a bit easier to come back on the T side or whatever. That was like kind of a common,
let me explain this one. This is what players always say, and by the way, you're completely right that they used to say it. They still say it today. I think the reality is teams, what happens is they have a really bad T side. They lose 12-3. They go on CT side. They lose 16-5. And they're like, well, we never had a chance because we started on T side. And it's like, look, buddy, the reality is if you're going to lose 12-3 on your fucking T side, you are probably going to lose regardless. Maybe you just pick up 5 extra rounds and you look cooler and you feel better because you got extra rounds because you started on CT. But you weren't actually going to win the game because that 12-3 was inevitable. the 12-3 was going to happen regardless. It just players feel a little bit worse about it. But then you also, people don't realize this. They're like, well, what about momentum? Some teams are momentum based. Anti-momentum is a thing, by the way, and I've seen it with teams I've coached where you get a really sick. I literally coached a team where I'm coaching this team. They won CT side 13-2. 13-2, and they won the game 16-12. CT side Inferno, they won 13-2. They win the game 16-12, I think, because the other team gets on CT, they win pistol, they win first gun round, and then in the back of your head, you're going, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. How are we throwing this? We're losing. We won 13-2. How are we throwing this? And then it's like in your head. You can't get it out. It's like anti-momentum because they're coming back when you should have won. This shit happens too. Everyone does think that the side you start on matters. That's why I'm so fucking...
Yeah, well, that's maybe it, right? What
I was saying when I said that they started CT, so they had everything they needed, is more so that, I mean, I don't really think it matters which side you start on. I think this tournament's proven that because loads of teams have had like Cloud9 versus Faze themselves go to CT side after an embarrassing defeat previously, and then they come back and win the game in regulation. Crazy, 16-14 C9. That happens all the time. This tournament's proven that, but the players still think it. And so if that's not even an excuse they can reach for, is what I was mostly getting at.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I think that it is at best for me, it's like a psychological thing.
Yeah.
To be honest, but I think it goes quite far. And then you know, psychology is a big part of the game for sure, right? And you do have that A1S, and if you're at the very, very peak of the game, this is why it's seen as a bit problematic, where it's like, you can abuse those facts way, way more. You can abuse the fact that the A1S is busted and traces, and you've got better spray control, you've got better read on where players like to play on the other side of a smoke or whatever, right?
They can't hear your sounds because not only is it silence, it's also LAN and there's a crowd.
Exactly.
They keep moving.
Yeah. Sure. But there's those kinds of angles where it, I think those things are going to give you an advantage in your mind. Right, we can definitely, but I don't know. It is like you say. I always like the idea that like the score at the top, it's something that I'll pull out on a cast or whatever. The score at the top doesn't matter, and I think that is also the case for a lot of teams where it's like you call around, you do your shit, it works or it doesn't, and then you move into the next round. And obviously it depends on where the economy's at. That's the beauty of the game, but it's not such a big deal and that's going to make you great from your good teams and all this. Can you do it on LAN? Can you do it in a major? And can you do it on a rainy day in Stoke? It's like it's that kind of thing where you need to overlook these so-called psychological advantages. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think that it's something that people, and I feel it when I play. I think that's sort of the big thing, is that a lot of people might feel it when they play, because the A1S is a lot easier to use. It's busted. And it's easier to coordinate with 4 random other people on the CT side than it is on the T side. So I think that people, not pundits necessarily, but the casual viewers let that bleed into their armchair analysis, is that my experience is, so therefore it must be extrapolated to the highest level of the game. And that's just, again, not true, right? Like, as we've mentioned this game, right? Vitality beating Faze, very one-sided affair, 16-6. Most of those rounds came from Vitality's T side. So
I don't even think it's that. I think people in their own games, I think, get the wrong idea because they get a feeling that, like, when they started on T side in a really lopsided game, that they never had a chance, even though they might have had plenty of a chance. And then when they start on CT side and they get destroyed, it's like, well, there's no excuse there. So like you're like, it's like selective memory where you just forget the times, and it's like, just like you're kind of like you're like contextualizing losses in a specific way because people have kind of like, because CT is easier, you feel better if you were on CT side for more rounds, but it didn't actually it might not have actually made. I don't even think that is, I think people are like creating their own reality more than they're actually necessarily seeing things correctly. Because I've always felt like in pugs, sometimes I feel like I'd rather start T side on a really CT sided map because people have to get comfortable. Like they have to, like, they forget the angles. They haven't played it in a week and they're not ready for it. And so you pick out the first gun round, you have a more of a chance to like catch them not really aware of what they're doing, but that's just like, that's another aspect to it. Whatever. whatever,
CS,
whatever.
Listen. CS is very psychological, and you know what else is psychological? The fucking dread fury you're gonna
The
feel when they
sponsor of
let
this
down.
podcast.
Oh yeah, that also too. Who's gonna sponsor? Can we get sponsored by Brazil? Is that possible?
I mean, I don't know about that. For multiple reasons, to be fair. Like, you know.
There you go.
But maybe the
sponsored by Elon Musk.
Sure,
Twitter.
sure, yeah, and his great. Let's not talk about that, to be honest.
There you go. There it is.
Oh man. But yeah, I don't
talk
know.
about the predictions? Are Faze crashing and burning? What do you guys think? I'll still say, like I said, they have to prove me wrong. Faze will win this tournament.
Yeah, I think. I don't know about win, but
easy. It's not even no doubt.
I think they should be able to run back here.
You think they'll make it playoffs at least?
Yeah, definitely. Right, like who? And again, it's this whole the most clutch team ever, and all this kind of stuff, which I think
unless it's a best of one, or unless it's online, or unless
right,
studio and not
most clutch team
arena.
ever when they need to be clutch and it matters.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they still will. It is. They've been the team that have, this whole format conversation that we've had, they've had the most unlucky draw. It could have been Vitality here. It could have been RV here. So...
Okay, I will say, this opening loss against Cloud9 could really have disastrous implications. Kerrigan's team at this point is like... I feel like they're pretty anti-fragile. They're pretty, like, anti-choke. But if they go up against Cloud9 again after like so many times, they were knocked out of EPL, right, by C9, and then they were obviously just now sent into the 0-1 pool before losing to Vitality. They were sent there after choking a crazy lead.
Should have won that game.
Yeah. So I don't. That's the only bugbear at this point, which is weird. Because it's been a while since we've had this is like a TSM v Fnatic back in that era, 2015 or whatever. This is kind of like that, where C9 is like they can topple the dominant team. So maybe so long as it's not in a final, I don't know. We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, if it was in a final, I don't see Cloud9 winning, to be honest. But
yeah, I would agree with that, right? And but it's just like for whatever reason they've got these guys' number earlier in the tournament, and so that's interesting, right? But I still think as long as they avoid C9 for the foreseeable future. Which it seems pretty likely that they will at this point. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I'll give my opinion on the Cloud9 Faze thing because I've been coaching a team recently. I've done a lot of looking into Cloud9 and Faze, and they both play. I hate stealing things from Faze, like strats or plays or whatever, because I think Faze typically plays. I think they have a lot of faith in their players. I think Kerrigan, one of the things he does really well is he really empowers his players to make plays. To do things to make reads, and when you've got a team with Rops, Twists, you've got so many players that have so much experience, you can empower them to make reads and make plays that might not be technically optimal, but that the player is making a comfort play, and every player for a fan perspective, you might not know this. Every player has comfort plays. There are peaks that some players that are really good, like actually, I don't want to leak anything. Whatever. But anyways, there are plays that, like, for example, oppers will make that 99% of oppers love a peak. They love it. And your opper might just be like, nah, doesn't work for me. This never works. It just doesn't. I just can't get kills there. That happens with oppers a lot. You see it a lot. Riflers is the same thing, except it's not like the same level of understanding, because with an op, it's like you get the kill or you don't. With the rifle, it's a little bit more kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
They have comfort plays. They have plays that everyone loves that they don't love, and they comfort play being a play that maybe not everyone loves, but they works really well for them. And I think Faze lean into that a lot. But on the other side, Cloud9 plays very unique. There's a lot of utility they throw that almost especially on CT sides, that almost nobody else throws. They've got a lot of setups they play that they lean into like really heavily that other teams rarely play. And so if you have like comfort plays versus a style of play that's very different, you're going to run into a wall there, because you're expecting to play against something that you're not playing against. And so you need to be really like coordinated, and you need to be really methodical to beat that. And I think that's where it kind of comes in, that Cloud9 is getting the edge, because you're just running kind of a certain style into the wrong type of opponent that plays really differently. Like, for example, on Ancient, almost nobody, like, I've looked through like 150 rounds, and there's like 2 rounds where teams have rushed mid against Cloud9 on their T side, on their opponent's T side against Cloud9 on CT, because they play so aggro in mid, and then they have to adjust their whole setup because nobody rushes mid against them. They play like differently on A, they play differently everywhere because they're like basically basing it around a style they play in mid that teams aren't used to. So it's like it all kind of trickles down into this really weird looking kind of style that's very different than what you're expecting. And other teams play differently as well, but I think usually they're a little closer to the average than Cloud9 is, and I think that's kind of where they're running into it, personally.
Okay, fair enough. I mean,
So
yeah,
what you're
a
saying
little bit of a deep
is
dive.
Faze need to hire you as an analyst because
Yeah.
unlike what Kassad definitely didn't say on that show, obviously all analysts are terrible and just useless.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I listened to that whole show, and it was kind of interesting because he was talking about empowering players, like empowering Nico.
Mhm.
I think that's exactly what Kerrigan does so well, is he empowers his players to make plays, and doesn't like restrict them too much. And there's a fine balance there, because if you don't restrict them at all, you know, you can run into problems where you just can't beat certain teams. You know.
Well, FaZe must be comfortable with just always having to win every single match. So maybe this will
Yeah.
be their most comfortable. Maybe this
Yeah.
is where we will see them activate.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still want to. I can't count them out. I'm assuming that when they go up against like this format can't fail them multiple times and give them an opponent that they should be facing in playoffs in the O2 match. Surely that won't happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll be safe from that, and they'll at least pick up a win before anything gets super scary at this point. Even though I guess you could say this is already kind of scary. But
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
if they go 0-3, I think it'd be the biggest shock
yeah, sure.
of like
Nobody would have
the
put FaZe
past-
in the O3. I
the
don't.
past, like,
Zero people,
5,
surely.
6 majors. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, I can't really think off the top of my head of anything that would match that. Yeah, so we'll see. I still give them a good shoo-in to at the very least make it through the Legends, but I don't think they're gonna win actually.
Really, because I feel like if they make it to playoffs, nothing can even stop them. Like that's kind of my take right now. Is that like if they, assuming they come back, which I'm taking them to, who's going to defeat them at that point, right? Like, does any team consistently look better than FaZe?
I think FaZe. Okay, so I didn't actually give my opinion on FaZe as a whole.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
go
think
for it.
FaZe have looked a little bit different since the player break, I feel like,
Yep.
and they are a team that's like they're consistently on the knife's edge of losing every game.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, sure.
Like even in the playoffs, the last major didn't Spirit like they 2-0'd Spirit, but it was like
One of them was a super.
3
They were
maps
both
worth of rounds, wasn't it?
both OTs. Then Dust 2 was
Yeah.
like double or
Yeah,
triple
it's
OT,
Dusty was
yeah.
like 25, like 29, 25 or some shit, right? It
Something
was like
crazy,
crazy. Yeah, it's like you never know really where to place FaZe, and so it feels like they're almost a little bit like Vitality in that, you know, it kind of feels like they could lose or win at any moment. And that's why it's hard to write them off until they prove they can't, because it's not like they're 16-1ing and then they go from 16-1ing everyone to like, you know, losing. It's like they're 16-14ing and then they lose. You know, it's like it doesn't feel like there was a lot that changed. You know,
I know
so
where to
I don't
place
know.
them, Vu. Right in the
Yeah.
finals. Let's go.
I don't know. I felt like they felt a little bit different since the player break. I felt like
Yeah.
they've come off the player break and
Yeah,
they're
they
not
had a
really
pretty
the same.
miserable EPL, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
But you're
So-
top dog as well. It's hard. It's hard, right?
I
Like
think
to
Navi
stay
wins.
in that
I'm
spot.
guessing Navi.
I'm
gets it done.
I think Navi in my gut, yeah, for sure. But you know, yeah, when you top and the thing is they were top, you know what I mean? Like it was a really good gap. And they've, you know, got the major, got the Cologne, got the Cato. That in and of itself is a pretty legendary year. That's a pretty good year. And if they can get another major here and the Grand Slam, therefore, it would be nuts. But I think it's really tough in the modern game to have like a dynasty, to be honest with you, and to have like a super consistent. There's a lot of tournaments in the calendar.
Yeah.
And then just the way that the game is moving a lot faster and the sort of skill ceiling, and you know, we might have to wait until this ilk of players kind of retires a little bit before we get you know, the players who are at the moment 19 to 21 taking over the game, and you know, maybe some of them will find a dynasty.
I don't know. I don't think it's that hard to get a dynasty going necessarily. It's just I don't think people will talk about FaZe as being like this all-star studded team, but I don't know if I buy it that much. Like, look, they all in every role except for IGL, fragging wise, they have players that are like in the top 3, top 4, top 5 at their role. They're not. It's not like Prime Astralis where they've got the best player in every role. It's not like Prime Navi where they've got the best player in every role. Their players all against several of the teams they're playing is. Could you say that Cloud9 or Faze is better than Cloud9 man to man? I don't think you can. Like
Well,
maybe it's a wash, but like clearly Shiro and Axile are much better than anyone on Faze, in my opinion.
yeah.
You disagree with that one?
The only one you could say is like Rops, but that's not a clean comparison. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they
It
don't
would
really
be
have the
Rob's Hobbit, right?
roles.
Rob's Hobbit
Yeah.
would be more, and
Yeah.
yeah, and Hobbit's not getting blown out of the water. Hobbit's great.
No,
He's
yeah.
struggled a little bit recently, but he's you could say Rob's beats Hobbit, sure.
Yeah, but I don't think Twist
yeah.
beats Axile, right? So like, what would you even?
Yeah, Nafany probably beats Kerrigan fragging wise. I
Sure.
feel like.
Or it's a wash, but on a good day for
yeah.
Kerrigan. But like, that's the most it's gonna ever be, right?
Yeah, I don't think I think at best it's kind of a wash between those teams. I'd give it to Cloud9. Navi, I give it to Navi, right? Those are their main opponents, right? Those are the other two teams that they're mainly playing against. And even Vitality, I mean, the difference between Zywoo and the best player on Faze is a pretty big fucking gap, you know? Maybe overall Faze have that by a bit, but it's not like they're not running away with that. You know, they're not running away fragging wise.
And Magisk has been pretty consistent so far, actually.
Yeah, Magisk has been
surprisingly.
doing really well this
Yeah.
year. He had some downtime for a while,
Yeah.
but yeah, with him coming back, FaZe isn't like when you look at dynastic teams, they have the best players at every fucking role. They almost always do. Fnatic, they had Olaf and Crims, top 1 and 2 in the world. Like arguably, I think Crims didn't rank number 2, but he was probably
and Flusher
yeah.
at the time.
And who if you know Aimless or no aim level,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If you know aim level,
I
he'll
do.
argue with Flush is the greatest player of all time, which I think is he's a little off his rocker at times, but Flusha was fucking unbelievable. You look at NIP, get right in Forest. Get right in fucking Forest, right? Then you look at SK, Fur and Fallen, and Coldzera, all three together. You look at Astralis, literally man for man, the best fragging players in every role. And not only that, but Glaive was miles ahead in certain years, miles ahead of any other IGL in fragging. He was unbelievable. And then you have Na'Vi, obviously Liquid, obviously and then you have FaZe, and it's like, yeah, well, everyone likes to go, yeah, well, they're a superstar team. They couldn't do it with Olaf. They're just star-studded. They just like, is Kerrigan that good? He couldn't do it until they got another super. It's like, bro, okay, yeah, they're superstars, but we're in a world where there are better players than them. You know, maybe they're superstars because they've been so good for so long. That doesn't mean they're the best in the world at their position. With Astralis, Device wasn't as good as Simple. Okay, you know, he was one player better than him in one role. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's tough though, because I think the effect of Astralis for me is pretty massive just on and you know, we have all this kind of like the COVID era where it's like, you know, online, and you have some of these teams and players who maybe in the past have thought they couldn't beat world-ending names like Simple and Nico or whatever, but actually when it comes to online, it's a different environment, but it's going to affect like the way that you believe in yourself going into a LAN and things like that. So I think that there's also, you know, an argument to be made that as compared to especially some of the earlier names and teams that you were mentioning, the general field is way, way better now. I don't know, man. I don't know. I still think that Rops is a world-class player, and yeah.
Oh, I'm not arguing he's not a world-class player.
Sure,
I don't think he's, you know, I think there's 2 or 3 players better than him, you know. Electronic is, well, it depends how you want to, like, where you want to put people against. You want to put them role-wise? You want to put them just as riflers? Like,
yeah,
you want to put them, like, role-wise, map to map, right? It really depends on how you're going to say
and then
it
different peaks and
directly,
things
right?
like that, I guess. But,
Yeah. But, I mean, like, Rob's in his role is one of the best, but it's, like, One of the best.
The
is, like,
difference
top
was
3,
with some
right?
of these
Not
other
top 1.
cases, you couldn't
Yeah.
make an argument for another player most of the time.
Sure,
Like,
right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
there were
fair.
some cases, but for at least the top 3 in these dynastic
The argument
teams,
is
right?
against that player, not
Yeah.
for that player.
Yeah,
I think you have
right,
to make
but
the
that-
argument for Rops, not against Rops.
But that does also go
what
into
it is.
like kind of what I'm talking about, where I think that
Yeah.
the field was not as even at those kind of times,
Mhm.
right? You maybe have Get Right and Forest still playing, but they're not playing to their 2013, 2014 levels when Flusher and Olof are playing to their peak levels. Whereas we're catching a lot of players in the past couple of years moving towards their peak all at the same time. You know, which is a pretty great and the peaks match. You know, because I'm sure there's going to be some people who may argue that you know, like a VP player or whatever might have been at their peak during those times, right? But they didn't quite match, or it's like, you know, your peaking player, to take this to its death, your peaking players like Pasha or whatever the fuck, where Olof is a completely different role, you know. So yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting conversation, but I think the game now, there's more arguments because of the state that we find ourselves in. And, you know, the past couple of majors, and this one especially, does speak to that fact that, you know, I hate the argument, but like the anyone can beat anyone has stepped up a little bit more, right? Whereas in the past we had a lot more clear cut, clearly defined teams that were winning, and, you know, they would quite easily win in some cases, you know, whether that is an Astralis or SK were also pretty dominant at their time, right?
Liquid or Navi with their little mini eras, if you want to
Sure,
call them that.
sure. You know, so yeah, it's pretty curious. It's kind of a cool argument, actually. We could probably sit and have an episode on that in and of itself, to be fair, of, you know, when we're, because you have to think it's like the game, but also like this iteration, but also Counter-Strike as a whole was still pretty young, and I think that it has just grown exponentially kind of the past 4 years, and then, you know, we're seeing the past 2 years especially. But, you know, we have an, do you think that if Cloud9, for example, if COVID never happens and they're still, you know, Gambit youngsters, and they're still kind of playing in the tier 2 and, you know, a few lands, and they get snuffed at a final by Godsent, for example, you know, I'd casted that particular event where like they didn't win, it's 2019, but they didn't win that out. But without COVID and the ability to just spam all these tournaments, get a fair bit of traction behind them, going on their like 30 BO3 win streak or whatever in 2020 against like tier 2 teams, and then they can, you know, you've got in some of those tournaments, you've got a heroic trickles down, you've got a complexity trickles down because they've not got any tournaments to play. You know, so I think that's a really kind of curious line of thought as to whether we get this version of Cloud9 and open, you know, CIS online RMRs that are going to affect an RV and a VP at the time into outsiders, and the way that, you know, they feel, where Gambit youngsters are going to be really confident going into that, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I think that, you know, Cloud9's actually a really interesting case for that, but, you know, there's been a lot of, and we've gone through like little adding taglines to teams where it's like in the past people would have said, yo, heroic in a group stage, man, never count them out, and we've gone past that even already, and we've not seen that team you know, overperform or win massive tournaments or whatever, but they have at times shitted on an RV when maybe it didn't matter so much. You know, Navi can still make it through a Pro League group stage by beating out other teams or whatever. So, yeah, I think that's actually a really cool line of thought, but I will go to bat for the idea that in the modern game, it's much more competitive. So, yeah, but again, maybe this also, talking of Faze, circles back to Carrigan being the GOAT, and, you know, he's got the pieces that he wants. Maybe they don't need to be the best, but he's still managed to, you know, because would you even argue at the time that they win their major, do they have, you know, the best players in their roles? Maybe not, because Axel was still playing.
Rain was
out of his
peaking
mind.
ridiculously.
Yeah,
at
Rain
that
for
event.
sure, yeah.
But
Rain had a
prior
really
to
good
that
event,
you
yeah.
wouldn't have said that. No, prior
Yeah.
to Rain doing that and getting MVPs or getting the MVP.
Well,
number
people
and
like to
stuff.
revise history a lot.
Sure,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's, I mean,
People
we
really
also
like to
just
revise
lose it
history.
naturally by like maybe forgetting some of the contextual points, right? Like
Yeah, it's
the
hard.
other thing that we should.
There's a lot of games
Yeah.
going, bro. You know.
Yeah. And so, especially post-COVID, and so thinking about all the different contexts. But I think it's an interesting thought experiment to put is like, I remember I was positing the idea that we were entering into a parity era when Navi forced everybody to make roster changes after Stockholm and after that year, right? After 2021, every team was making moves. That's the Vitality move to go international. That's the like some of this G2 stuff where they got Munacy and all the, you know, there's so many moves that get
I
made.
think that was Navi that forced everyone to make. I feel like G2 forced everyone to make moves by being so shit clearly and still making it to the final.
Sure,
like just
yeah.
that trash of a team. You just have Nico literally drag the
Yeah, he was
rotting
the-
corpse
actually-
of G2 over the line into the
Yeah.
into the finals. Like that is
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Well, yeah, I mean, every other team at that event must have been like, dude, we could have done this. What the fuck?
Yeah, anyone could have done that. Really, I mean, if they were better, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, Heroic probably like if you actually go back and watch that match where it was G2 against Heroic in the semis, that could have been Heroic's match any day of the week. And Cadian just
100%,
whiffed
yeah.
some obvious shots that are like, I mean, if you can somehow zero out the pressure and stress and you just left click once,
That was
when you're
Land
fucking
Cadian,
shit-
100%.
That was Land
Cadian.
That was Land Cadian, dude.
Yeah.
Almost as bad as Surson Land. But no, the main idea that I had behind this point was just that because I felt like everybody was making all these moves, and it seemed like the early results was very tumultuous. I thought we were entering parity era. I knew FaZe would be a strong team with the addition of Rops and all this other stuff, but you have to think like the fact that everybody's, and I don't think I was alone in assuming that a lot of the analysts in the space were saying that this should be stacked teams followed by stacked teams, like the whole top 10 or at least top 5 should be really strong. But FaZe were winning every tournament for a long time, every big tournament for a long time, right? And if they still somehow pull it together and win this tournament, then they'll be packing up the Grand Slam and they'll be obviously winning a second major. That's the 4 piece of like any tournament, right? It's like, or any year. It's both majors, Kato and Cologne. Nobody's done that before. Really, the only way you'll be able to break that record is if you also win like an EPL or some Blast Arena event or something in the same space, like in a year or two or something. But the thing that like the fact that FaZe have been able to do that, I think it's just more points for Kerrigan, Goat, IGL. Also, Glaive sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Lamar.
Yeah,
But-
yeah. No, I just want to rally against, you know, how many people are like, yeah, well, actually, when you say revisionist history, I think it's revisionist history to say Kerrigan's the GOAT. You're just recency bias. That's all it is. I've been saying this for a long time.
Yeah,
buddy.
yeah.
Listen,
Yeah,
buddy. I've been saying this for a
Just
long
like just
fucking
like
time.
your xenophobic comments on crowds.
Man,
You have been incredibly consistent in your xenophobia.
I had a back
and your
and forth with
revisionism.
someone that said Glaive's the GOAT because he revolutionized the way nades are used in CS. And I go, how do you know it wasn't Zonic? And he goes, oh, well, at worst, it was 50-50. I don't know why you're trying to say you know it was Zonic. And I'm like, hold on, you just said you knew it was Glaive. Are you fucked in the head? Like, all I did was throw your argument back at you. That's why Glaive's not the fucking GOAT, because you don't know how much Glaive actually did. You don't know how much
Kerrigan
Glaive
went to a
actually
million different rosters, all these
Yeah.
different teams. He's built so many teams that can at least contend for titles, if not outright win them. He got fucking mouse sports to championships.
By the
before,
definition of in-game leader, you have to say it is Kerrigan, unless you're just one of those guys, and that's like most of the community. Excuse me, if you won the game, you had the better IGL. It's just how it is. The better IGL wins. It's like I don't know shit about football, but I hear Thorin arguing about like Tom Brady all the fucking time, and it's the same exact arguments. It goes, just because he won doesn't make him the best quarterback. Just because he won doesn't make him the best IGL. And everyone will, excuse me, 4 majors? Excuse me, what, 5 rings? Whatever the fuck, however many Tom Brady has won. It's like, there is no argument back. Like, what the fuck, what, hello? There's, like, you don't know the intricacies of these. Plus, I mean, Zonic literally came out and said, yeah, well, we didn't do any in-game leading where you like make stuff up and you try and specifically counter. We just did whatever we did in practice, and we already knew all the reactions. It was just like, it was all, we knew what we were going to do in any situation permanently, and it was the exact same thing we practiced. And it's like, okay, so he's not really doing much in-game leading then, is he? And it's like, well, you know, whatever. Anyways, you know, not
and
to get
now
back
he
into
really
this one.
We are opening or reopening the can of worms, you know.
CT sides at the major. We agree that the CT, like the
well,
games
dude,
on
Furia
games
just
on
came
average
back
feel like they've been
against
more- yeah,
Spirit.
yeah.
Furia just
Was
came
that
back
a
against
12-0
Spirit.
CT side?
It was
It's a pretty fast.
no, they
CT
did
side,
win.
right?
They did it was
12-2.
11-4.
12-2
11-4.
CT side.
Wait, for Spirit? Was it 12-3? I think
No. Spirit was 11-4. Furia was 12-2.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is
There you
Spirit
go.
were playing against Furia.
Yeah. Spirit
Oh,
got
you're
11-4
saying they
on their
got that many rounds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then they got 12-2'd back, right?
Yeah.
That's how Furia won. And then
Yeah.
I mean, Ancient Ents 12-3'd on their CT, but that's Ancient. But still, like, it does
Yeah.
feel like I don't know why it is necessarily. I mean, it's the M4A1S, which is, by the way, still incredibly overpowered.
Yep.
Plus the MP9, which, by the way, is still incredible.
Yep.
It is
Yep.
overpowered based on the money, it undeniably. And the 5.7 is fucking busted. Holy fuck, the 5.7 is unbelievably strong. You can like two-shot people from across the map, and it's so fucking accurate. It's insane how good that fucking gun is.
I still prefer the Tech 9, but you have to think about it because
Tech 9 is good if your
I
aim
like
is
running
insane.
around and still being somehow accurate enough to
because
one-tap
your
people,
first
so.
shot with the Tech 9 is like a laser beam,
Yeah.
but with the
Even when you're
5.7,
moving.
the 5.7 is like oh, he's dead. Like I just did like still accurate on my 7th bullet, spraying as fast as I possibly can. So you
Wasn't
got
there
three
some
guns.
statistical breakdown where the MP9 is also listed as like better in every stat than the FAMAS? Isn't that like a real thing?
Literally, if you talk to players, at least players that I've talked to, generally you buy an MP9 if you need to force, unless you absolutely can't justify using an MP9 in this spot, in which case you use FAMAS. It's not like
it's like it's a range thing, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, but people are starting to use
it's not a fight
people are
thing.
starting to use the UMP again. That's really sickening to me.
Actually, I've seen I'll make an argument for the UMP, but we'll go there later. Okay. The FAMAS is like Cat on Mirage, or maybe if you play B Anchor on Inferno because you're like playing new box, but then you can just push banana. Like basically it's the MP9 supremacy, and the MP9 is cheaper. If they were the same price, you'd still be looking at the MP9 as a better option than the FAMAS. And then I don't know, there must be something about the crowd, like momentum maybe, or just not being able to hear, like not being able to make mid-round calls as effectively. Maybe calls are getting drowned out. Maybe the CT side, like they're getting reads on where the T's are based on crowd energy. There's got to be something, because like Peaker's advantage and the M4A1S, I don't feel like at previous lands since the M4A1S buff have been this CT sided.
No, it hasn't been this bad. It hasn't been this bad ever, I think.
To be fair, I mean, you do have some teams that are just really good on CT, like Fnatic specifically.
Yeah.
Let me look at there again.
It's also just like the way that it rolls sometimes. Pro League was kind of really T-sided. It felt like a lot of teams had cracked, you know.
Yeah, Pro League had like two people in the audience, and they were both ESL employees. So.
It might just be luck. It might be. I mean, you would expect it to be more CT sided on LAN, because as much as people want to be, yeah, suddenly like 50 millisecond, you know, listen, the difference is you can hold an angle on LAN, you can hold an angle when someone is peeking into you and be very confident that you're going to kill them the majority of the time. Online, you can't. You need to hit some nice shots to be able to hold an angle. You can still do it generally, but it's like you're questioning it. Should I hold this angle, or should I just play like a delayed repeat, right, where I'm trying to catch them, right? There's a question mark. On LAN, there's no question mark. You just hold the angle, you're gonna win. And then I'll make, since we UMP. If we're done, I'll make the argument about the UMP. The UMP has benefits, but it's very specific, because the UMP is shit at range, but if you're really close by, you're dinking them for 99. So if you want to go like Nuke, if you want to play Tetris, like the jump up boxes onto Hut, you can lock down squeaky rushes insanely well, because you're just mowing down the first guy with a 99 damage dink from that range. So there are some spots where I can see the UMP, but it's even more circumstantial. Whatever. Than the FAMAS. Yeah, it's even more like, you know, very specific circumstances you want to use it in.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I kind of feel like that's a healthy spot for the SMGs to be in, though. Yeah. It should be a bit situational.
Well, the MP9's not healthy. But
yeah,
if it was
exactly.
Pricier.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, but where the UMP's at. UMP is cool.
Yeah, sure.
We like where the UMP is at. You know, we like kind of maybe where the Deagle's at the moment.
What do you think about?
You know, you pull them out in a pistol, but they don't really do much. You know,
they're really only good against pistol.
Let me make an argument though. I actually think the the MP9 shouldn't be nerfed, even though it's overpowered, because if we removed the M4A1S right now, and the M4A1S, if that didn't exist, then the economy would be so heavily for T sides that like for a while, especially with the SG meta, I know we're going back, the only thing making the game basically unplayable was that the MP9 was insanely good. And I'm concerned that the MP9 is going to get nerfed, and then the A1S is going to get nerfed, and then you have the T side getting way too favored. You know, that would be my concern.
Sure.
Yeah, Valve doesn't operate in nuanced lands. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
their
yeah,
solution
also
to
true.
the SG was to gut the gun and make it practically useless.
Yeah.
So I mean, I still see some people use
I
it.
mean,
I actually,
technically
I personally
speaking,
like.
I was just going to say, technically speaking, the SG was overpowered for like 7 years.
Oh yeah, since the game
So,
came out, basically. Yeah.
Just no one
But,
noticed.
I'll
so,
just
yeah.
go by numbers, man. They just go by.
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
Okay, I predicted this. I called this beforehand, and I did the same thing. You can if you just look at the right numbers, you can predict what Valve's going to do. This is why I knew that they were going to remove Train, because it was the least played map in like top 30 in the pro scene, and one of the least played maps in matchmaking.
Besides Vertigo. Sorry.
Yeah, but Vertigo was just added, and Ancient was just added. So most likely Overpass is the next map to be removed, because they're not removing Vertigo or Ancient. So it's got.
God damn, they better.
Even though
Listen, which
everyone
map would
loves
you
Overpass.
like best to remove? It's all the maps that came out
use
lately.
the argument for the SG first, and then we'll go there. All right,
Yeah.
the SG, you can track it because, and the reason you know this, it took them a year to nerf the CZ when it was a pocket AK. To the point, I'm telling you this because this is genuinely how bad it was. 3 months in, I go, I'm really struggling with this gun, but I'm not going to bother learning to use it because they're going to nerf it soon. And then like 9 months later, they nerfed it. Though with
That's
the SG,
literally Nico, dude. You and Nico are the same person.
the moment that the SG became a higher percentage kill, got more of the kills in games than the AK, they nerfed it. The moment that happened, they nerfed it. As soon as there was a tournament where that happened, it's gonna be the same thing with other stuff where it's like there's a number that they're waiting for it to hit, and then they're gonna nerf it. You know, that I don't know what that number is exactly, but you just got to track the numbers.
Yeah,
and Overpass should not be removed. It's a great fucking map. Okay,
sure.
stop.
Agreed.
I'd say Vertigo's maybe deep enough in its fucking timeline that they could remove it now.
It was deep enough one day and
well, indeed, but you know what I mean. Like, it's not the newest map, so it doesn't look like a fucking blunder. So
looks like one to me. Just get it out. Get it out. Get it out. I honestly would be happy with either Vertigo or Ancient being gone.
Yeah.
And some people are even saying Dust 2, which
it's just boring, bro.
It's old as fuck.
It's not
the
flawed,
changes to Suicide didn't really fix anything.
Yeah, but it's just like when it comes to watching, especially, it's just like you can just see where they're at the start of the round. And you're like, okay, I know how this round ends. You know, maybe the kills obviously are going to make it, but in terms of the way they play it out, and then mate, like being a tier 2 caster, the amount of games I watch on Dust, at least something happens on Vertigo, something happens on Ancient. You know, in Dust 2, it is like the amount of rounds where these teams will just run B, one guy watches the main tunnels push. Everybody else, like, you got one guy long, right? 3 go under, 3 go lower, whatever you smoke off short from somewhere. Could be from CT spawn, could be hinge. And then they'll go up short, do the Vanguard smokes, and then commit. Throw in a little bit of a fake to B or whatever to draw some guy into CT or get some But like Dust 2 is incredibly repetitive and incredibly boring in the way that it's repetitive, to be honest. Like as a spectator.
Nade drops fucked it too. Nade drops.
Yeah.
Every other map I think has been made better by nade drops,
not
except
Inferno.
for Dust 2.
And also it's like in terms of like where but for Dust 2, in terms of where like the player base is at and stuff, if they remove it from it, people are still going to play it. It'll still be like, the fastest queue. I think Mirage is like around there. But,
the thing that killed its queue time was the fact that it got remade, which is probably why. That's why I predict they're not going to remake Mirage anytime soon, because it will kill the performance on all those potatoes that they got.
Yeah. So. And also, like, people who really do care about their MM rank or whatever will stay away from a reworked map rather than learn it. That's kind of classic.
That is.
But yeah, I think Dust 2 to be removed would be totally fine. Because it would literally only affect the top level. Train not being in the active map pool, it's tanked. It was already pretty low, but it's like a fucking estimated 10-minute queue or whatever,
I just checked something. Sprout is either playing Outsiders or NIP next in the 0-2 match.
Listen, FaZe is either playing B and E or Outsiders.
Bro,
But the
my
only way that
03
they
pick.
can,
Everyone's
yeah.
03 pick is saved. Oh my god.
Yeah, man.
No, back to Dust 2.
I was gonna put Sprout. I was gonna put Sprout if I was doing it for realsies. So I think I did in the video.
That's what
The evidence is there. Nah, because I clocked myself halfway through and I was like, oh, I did say to like a small group of people that I'll put Vitality 03 for letting me down. But I did have Sprout initially.
To be honest, though, whenever
so I may have entered my pick'ems away.
Anytime I do my pick'ems, I post them on Twitter. I definitely change my mind before.
Sure, yeah.
And this pick'em, I put Fury 03 just because the number of people that called me racist for saying bad things about like I don't like this crowd that much. Mostly, actually, I don't like people gaslighting me, trying to say literally gaslighting, trying to say this happens every event. Okay, that's actually literally to the word. It's gaslighting. Okay, they're gaslighting me. I just put Fury 03 just to trigger the Brazilians.
Yeah.
And they got really mad. But yeah, you know, other than that, generally I just change my mind because I'm so unsure. Don't follow my pick'ems on Twitter.
Well, yeah, don't follow anyone's for this one. To be fair, just make up your own mind.
Hey, I'm 100% pick rate on my diamonds. I've got 100% of diamonds out of 100% of the events that I've tried to pick for, which is the last two only.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Didn't you
so
used
do
to have
I,
to
but
buy the
literally for the
before?
last one. What do you mean?
I think
you used to have to buy the stickers to be able to use them on the. I don't know. I used to. I definitely like when you used to do pick'ems. When you did, yeah.
Oh right, you mean like the team stickers to put them through?
Okay, at least I used to think that you had to buy the coin and buy the stickers to be able to put them through. For maybe I'm just the dumbest person in the world, you know.
Maybe really far back, but I don't know.
I thought that was the case, so that's why I didn't do it until fucking Stockholm. That was the first time I ever did it.
Yeah. I don't remember that. I've got a few coins that like I didn't finish because I kind of forgot, right? Because like obviously doing your pick'ems for the legend stage, you've got like 24 hours.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple like silver coins that I just didn't finish.
I've got to have like the oldest account with the least like operations and coins because my account has like I've been using this since the beginning of CS, and I have a Bloodhound operation coin,
bronze,
and Berlin. A silver Bloodhound. No, silver.
Mine's bronze, bro. Mine's bronze.
And then I've only got like the recent shit, like Broken Fang and Riptide. Those are like new, right? Those are all 2020, 2021. I only started getting those in 2020. So literally my only old school coin is Bloodhound from 2015 and Berlin from 2019. That's like my only. I fucked up, man. I fucked it, man. I fucked it. I could have so much.
How can you resell your
worth so much?
Yeah.
I know this account could be worth so much, bro. God damn.
Yeah. All right, gamers. I think that is going to do us here at the tail end. We've hit like 2 hours, and it's fairly late for me. So I think.
Of course, yeah.
I'm gonna. Well, you know, it's all good, mate. It's all good. I agreed to it, so I'll follow it through. But I think we got to stop somewhere. Right.
Might as well stop reminding you guys that Valve added skins to CSGO. Why did they do that? Why did they add skins? Why did they add agent skins? Why did they fuck visibility for every map? Why did they add vertigo? Why did they add ancient? Why did they ruin?
I made a lot of money on those agent skins. Accidentally, I meant to do a video where I had 10 people in different agent skins to show that some of them are overpowered.
Yeah.
We never made the video, so I just have 10 of some of the most expensive agents, and they've gone up like 3. Like I've got like 15 Sir Bloody Daryls that I got for like $4, and now they're like 15.
I think you also. That sounds like you've manipulated the market there, bro. Because you did make a video. You did make a video saying that skin's like the most OP.
The Squadron Officer was like 50 cents, and now it's $5.
I remember
that was the one I said was. OP.
I remember you put that video up, and I was like straight in there to go and get it, and then
this one, the Beast Squadron Officer did go up a lot in price, admittedly. But some of the ones I didn't buy a lot of, like the fucking Sir Bloody Miami Daryl, the one with the white hockey mask, is $50.
Jesus
$50.
Christ.
If I had done,
that's only strong on like Dust 2 or something, isn't it? Like
it's really strong on certain spots in Dust 2, mostly.
Yeah.
Wild. CL min models 1, please.
Well, there you go.
Like that's never gonna happen. Bro, I could have got them for $15 each, man. $15 when I was buying them. Oh, Bro, I came when fucking Reason Hollows were $200 each. I came so close to buying 4 and putting them on an AK. Instead, I bought 4 crowns and put them on an AK, which would be worth a shit ton now. But I got bored of it and sold it for basically like $20 above market value. I completely fucking screwed myself. And now there's someone on NIP that probably has my AK. It's like a Vulcan stat track with 4 crowns, which is the nicest looking AK ever. I can't believe what I've done, dude. I just got bored of it. I just got bored and I wanted a new AK, and I didn't at the time have the money to buy a new AK without selling my old one. So I just sold it, you know, and just got like some garbage. I think I've got the same one I have now, which is fucking a Kiyoshima gold at the end. Like, who the fuck cares about the goddamn? I made some bad ones. I coin flip gambled a $2,000 knife. You know, like I was not smart a few years back. You know,
we've all got stories like that.
Gamble, like, you know,
we've all got a couple like that. I had a pair of gloves that I sold that I could have held on to for more money and all that. But you know, it's hard, bro. It's hard.
Yeah, but on the bright side, I did make a lot of money selling my prints right before the market crashed at some point in like 2021.
There you go.
Well, there you go. Yeah. A good spot to end on, perhaps.
I owed money on taxes, and I was like, I need this money. I gotta sell this.
Fair enough. It seems like a pretty smart play, to be fair. All right, folks, thank you very much for watching. It has been a nice little episode there. I think lots of major talk and a little bit of petty grievances about a number of things, to be fair. I hope you enjoyed, and we will indeed be back next week with more of The Off Angle.
You're gonna love this video right here. You're gonna love it. Check it out right now.